there. Welcome to the City of Palm Coast City Council Workshop. Today is Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. It's 4 p.m. We're in the City Hall, John Nett's Community Wing. I'm calling this meeting to order. If you would please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, a short moment of silence, and please keep Mr. Stevens in your prayers and also Mr. Brooks. So he's on the road to recover. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. If you haven't done so already, please silence your devices. All devices, please silence them. Allison, could you please call the roll?
Of course. Mayor Norris?
Here.
Vice Mayor Panieri?
Present.
Barrow?
Here.
Councilmember Miller?
Here.
Member Sullivan?
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to start with public participation. Please remember, no defamatory comments. Please be clear and concise with your comments. This is for items that is not on the agenda. So if you have comments concerning any item on the agenda, please hold it until we get to that portion. So with that being said, anyone for public comment? Yes, ma'am. You should have drove up, Ms. Stancil.
I'm using my physical therapy to help me out.
Curbside service.
Hi, Donna Stancil, Seminole Woods.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a little bit of a complaint, and this has to do with appointments that you folks are doing up there. When we first moved here, when an appointment came up, the applicants had a chance to talk for you and present themselves to you in a fashion that you could understand who they were a little bit better. But nowadays, oh, and by the way, going back to that, there was a paper ballot. And everybody had a private vote that wasn't public. And if one person didn't take the lead, then they did it again. But nowadays, you're not doing that. Somebody in this city council, generally Mr. Gambaro, throws out his nomination, somebody immediately seconds it. And then there's a vote, and nobody gets a chance to talk to other applicants. You know, I don't care who your favorites are. Everybody should be considered. And it should be a private ballot, and nobody gets pressured into picking somebody just because you nominated it and he seconded it. So I think that we should go back to a private vote, and that everybody gets a chance to have an equal opportunity to become a member of these committees and appointments. Secondly, at the last meeting, I asked somebody to pay attention to what was going on at the right turn lane on 100 in Seminole Woods. I would like you to know that they are diligently working there, and they've made significant progress in the last couple of days. So thank you for that, if you had anything to do with that. So that's all I got.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, sir.
Jim Blecken, C-section.
Yes, sir.
Seeing as the building isn't going to be addressed today, per se, I'd like to address it again. We are letting in too many homes. And it's not just impacting the infrastructure, it's also impacting the real estate market. It's impacting the value of every home. The market right now has over 1,400 homes in Palm Coast alone, and we only sell 120 a month. It's over a year of inventory. We are at a critical mass point. I think it's time to really slow down all the building, even use that big bad word moratorium on building until the market turns back up and we can actually get a proper ratio of inventory to sales that's sustainable. Because if we keep flooding the market, you're going to oversaturate the market with new homes. The old homes won't sell at all, and you're going to cause certain sections of this city to collapse financially. The values will shrink. People already are having hard times with the extra burden of taxes, insurance, utilities going up. The value of their homes are going to come down. They're not going to maintain them. They're going to spiral right down the toilet, and we're going to have vacant homes for years. God forbid the word HUD comes around, but it's very, very likely. So 19,000 set aside. Please reconsider. Let's catch up on our infrastructure that's desperately needed and not accounted for in the 19,000 new homes. And let's build responsibly, very responsibly. And as far as wastewater storm, did anyone bother to think about not only assessing new homes, but also new commercial, new industrial? Let's get them to do it. How about putting a special assessment through the tax rolls, which would be paid off on all the taxes and base it upon how many toilets are in a building? Have the condos pay their fair share. The apartments pay their fair share, single-family homes and the businesses. There are ways to go around other than placing a bond through the utilities, which is going to put everybody's utility rate up 31% forever, not just to cover this bond, because we all know 30 years down the road, when the bonds have been satisfied from the increase in utilities, the utility companies will not lower their rates back down. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, sir. This is not anything on the agenda? No, okay. Just make sure. Thank you, sir.
So Nathan Phelps, District 4. I don't know how to do this. I think that we're coming to a point where a lot of citizens feel that we have a crisis of representation I don't think that Charter ever thought we would have 2 appointees on the council. So I think that was an oversight. And I would like, I'm not taking sides here on mayor and otherwise, but I think if the mayor is removed, I think it makes sense to also put both appointed positions up on the ballot, because it doesn't make sense to have multiple unelected appointees when we have the opportunity to have an election, because we had a presidential election that set our council, and that's when you get the most representation. We all know that when the president's up, more people show up for the election. People just know more. I think it makes sense to, and I don't know if this comes down to a charter amendment or what, but having an election for mayor seems similar to a major election, since it does align with the council. And part of my inspiration for that is I have 4 email chains going, and the 2 elected officials of the council members, I haven't emailed you, Mayor, we've spoken on the topic that I'm here for later. The people that were elected are very quick. They give me 24 hours, they turn around, they respond to me. But with my own representative from District 4, I have a 4-month-old email that hasn't been replied to. I spoke to him about the chickens or later, and he made a call to one of my friends instead of calling back to me after I showed him our pilot program from 2 years ago. And months later had drinks with that friend. He said, Mr. Gambaro doesn't like you and he thinks you're pushy just because I wanted follow-up emails. That's my own district. I should be able to get quick, easy, open access. That's part of the role. I know this feels personal, but this matters to me, that the role of city council is to work with the citizens for open engagement and to make statutes in town. And that's what I want. And so I think, I don't want to use the big recall word. I just want, if there's a major change in our council, I think it makes sense to put every unelected seat in the council up on the ballot. It follows logic to me, and maybe other people feel the same way, but I'd at least like to know how we can do that, because I want representation, especially from my district. And I'm seeing different patterns from elected and unelected council people. Like I said, not trying to make it personal, but bring up the topic objectively outside of the politics that are going right now, just representation on the part of citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Stanzer.
Good afternoon, Mark Stansel, Seminole Woods. This is not a complaint, surprise. I see the lights are going up on Sesame, and I was just wondering, you probably don't know, but maybe the city manager knows. I'm just curious as to when they might get turned on. I know they got all the poles and lights up, but I know they got to get with FPL, just like they did on Seminole Woods. But I'm just wondering if there's a target date, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public comment? All right, we're moving right along. I'm going to bring it back to the dais. City manager, you have any follow-ups?
I will get a timeline on the lights turning on Sesame. I don't have that in front of me today, but I'll get an answer to Mr. Stansel. And I don't have anything related to operations on any other public comment, Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other council members?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go right ahead, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. For Nathan, I was just going to mention that we are going through a charter review process here in the near future. So it'll be my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, City Manager, but we will have a committee that will kind of review. I believe there would be also.
It's on the agenda for today to
Okay.
discuss.
Oh,
Mr.
great.
Duffy is presenting.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
For Ms. Sample, just so you know, in my case, I wasn't responsible for Ray Stevens getting sick. In fact, I was the one at the canvassing board who signed off on his election when we had the vote in November. And then he got sick. There were 13 candidates who applied for this position, and we did do interviews, both privately and publicly, and then there were public votes. So it was the only possibility we could do at that point. Since we were into the year already and much less than 2 years till the next election. And I will be up for election in 2 years, not 4.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. He was addressing the election comment.
Election time.
Anyone else on the council, anything?
Yeah, right here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Go
so
right ahead.
to Mr. Phelps, there you go. We have spoken. I apologize for not responding quicker to the email that you sent, the most recent one. But we have spoken, and I have met in person with your colleagues here in City Hall on the issue. So if I'm not meeting your expectations, I'll work better to do that. Okay? Thanks.
Sir, Mr. Duffy, you got anything?
No, sir.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, did you have anything? No, Mayor. Okay, one thing, City Manager, if we could, and I'd like to get consensus from the council, I would like to know not how much we pay for staff and stuff as far as advertising, but I would like to know how much the city pays for advertising and marketing for this past year, our budgeting year, and where those funds went within the community, state, or nationally. Could you think you could get that by the end of this meeting?
I can provide you with the communications and marketing budget. Yes, sir.
I want to know how much money went out. I don't need the whole budget. I just need to know how much money went out to organizations for advertising for on behalf of the city.
There's a line item that says advertising, sir,
Okay.
within that budget.
It has by name which organizations?
No, but all of that information would be on our transparency dashboard. There's a vendor portion where you can see who we've paid out to those vendors.
Okay, could I get that? Just a list of the vendors, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, the gentleman with the question about the appointments. As things stand right now, this next election, there will be 3 seats up for re-election. Okay? And that's it. Okay, we'll move on to anything else from the council. Seeing nothing, we'll move on to item E, presentations. The first presentation is the traffic calming plan.
Mayor, City Council, as our staff and consultant are getting the presentation ready, just wanted to remind you all that this is a longstanding City Council initiated strategic action plan priority for neighborhood safety. The process has evolved several times, and now we are looking at a traffic calming plan and creating a process for the entire city. So while we did a pilot study with specific applications and uses, the implementation would be citywide. And I'll let you guys take it from there.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we get started for the council, Alice, these two documents you have here, these are from Traffic Logic, and though I wasn't on the council when they implemented the study and put those traffic calming devices, I did recommend this company because these are all recycled rubber. They're a company, they're out of Canada, but we'll show them a little bit of love. But if you guys, when you get to it, can you explain how much money we invested with this company for the devices that we have currently in use during this study? But I wanted to make sure everyone got this, and these are all the options that this company offers. We also did I guess a Teams meeting with them, and they were explaining some of their traffic cameras and stuff also that they market. So gentlemen, if you please, go right ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members, and City Manager. My name is Vinish Crawford. I work in the Stormwater and Engineering Department. I am the project manager for the traffic calming plan. Before we begin our presentation, I would like to provide some brief background. In June, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In June 2024, the city and consultant completed the speed limit study throughout the City of Palm Coast and presented our recommendation to the council. Following that presentation, council directed staff to conduct a traffic calming plan. Then we came back to the council back in September 2024 and presented with the scope and fee. And it was approved in that council meeting. And today we are here to present the results of the traffic calming study along with the traffic calming pilot program. Now I'll hand over to our consultant to go over the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Vinish. Mayor, City Council. Emmanuel Rodriguez from Kinley Horn, project manager on the consultant side. Let's begin. So here's our presentation. Quick agenda. I know Vinish did a good job giving a background. I'll touch a little bit more on little technical items on the background, how we got here. Go through the scope of work, what we did for this traffic calming plan, touch on the pilot study and the results of the survey, the public engagement, and then the traffic calming process, which is the kind of the meat of the traffic calming plan. And we'll wrap it up with the action items and the next steps. So here you have a snapshot of the speed limit study, right? The city conducted the residential speed limit study really to see if we can reduce that speed limit from 30 to 25, 30 being the statutory kind of default speed limit for all residential roads. And yeah, the result was like speeds were too high on the residential collector roads and we could not lower the speed limit. And to do so, we will have to implement some strategies, modify the roadway to get those speeds down. And that was the recommendation to perform a traffic calming plan. A traffic calming plan, a little bit for background, is mostly consistent with other jurisdiction, municipalities, and agencies. They tend to have one. It really guides staff and council and what steps they have to follow to vet whether a road meets the requirement for traffic calming. Here's the scope of work. I would say the traffic calming plan that we perform or are currently performing and finishing, it's quite enhanced in terms that it included a pilot study component and a public engagement. And lastly, you got the traffic calming process and toolkit, which is more the details of how the traffic calming should be installed, the spacing and all that engineering item. But really focusing on the public engagement, getting feedback from the public, hearing what they liked, what they didn't. And then the pilot study, which is actual data from the city that we collected from the drivers driving on the city and not relying on other data that was down in a different state. It's data that we looked and collected and we can show it. Started fall last year and now we're here. So a little bit of the pilot study, right? The intent of the pilot study, as I mentioned, was to see the effectiveness of the traffic calming treatments. In coordination with staff, we selected 3 different treatments. As you can see on the screen, starting from the top to the bottom, the speed cushions were installed on Floater Park Drive and Zimmerman Drive. This is your vertical displacement. And then the chicanes would be your horizontal displacement. We're installing Farnsworth and Forest Grove Drive. And then the third one was the lane narrowing. That's more like perception. Narrowing lanes are shown to reduce speed in some locations. But the intent was to collect data before, without any treatments, and after with the treatments and compare it to see how effective they were. In the screen here, we have the speed cushions where they were installed. The blue circle is the treatments, and the orange diamond is where we collected speed and volume data. The intent was to find locations where, of course, they're not in front of driveways, and based on the limitation of the roadways, we would determine an area that we could also collect data. As you can see, the data was collected in between those treatments so that we can see like where the speeds are highest, kind of in between the treatments, and that we can measure effectively the speed. Like if we were to measure it too close to the speed bump, then the vehicle would be like almost at a rest position, wouldn't be effective. Similarly, we did the same thing with the chicanes for Farnsworth and Forest Grove Drive. And here, instead of 4, we installed 2 of these treatments. Again, limitations on the roadway, we could install more, but this is where these were located and where the speeds and volumes were collected. Oh, and so you can see in the top right, there's a little picture of the actual devices were installed. I do want to point out that the treatments that were selected were based on, the cost and a quick build treatment, something that can be installed quickly, temporary, to get data from the vehicles and understand driving behaviors. Of course, the chicanes could be designed at a more permanent or more enhanced, that it would include either boulders or planters or a concrete raised island. That could differ. But for the purpose of the pilot study, we decided and put in delineators to collect that data. It was quick, it was, effective in the data collection process, and it was something that worked pretty well for this pilot study. And then lastly, the lane narrowing consisted of 6-inch white striping on the edge of the road, so ensuring we have 20 feet from striping to striping, so 10 feet per lane on each direction. And that was performed throughout the whole segment. This table here summarizes the result. I'll touch on the 2 main data points that we collected. You can see you have the 85th percentile speed and the 10 mile per hour pace. The 85th percentile speed, that's the speed at which 85% of the traffic is driving at or below. So looking at the speed cushions on Florida Park Drive, without the treatment, that's 36 miles per hour, so 85% of the traffic was driving 36 or below. And then with a 10 mile per hour pace, that is the 10 mile per hour range which most drivers are traveling at, right? So 20 to 29, most people are within that range, for example. And so you can see in the last column, is it effective or not? Speed cushions, very effective, right? We saw that the speed dropped from 36 to 32 or 31. And then when we look at that upper limit of the 10 mile per hour range, from 37 to 33. So very effective treatment for these 2 type of roads. Looking at the chicanes, somewhat effective, right? We did see a reduction in speed, but not as much at the speed cushions. That is also, based on the number of treatments that we installed, we could increase the effectiveness by putting more chicanes, right? But then again, most of the roads in Palm Coast have multiple driveways. They're residential collector roads, so you can't really install many of them because of limitations on the roadway. So that is what the data show. They can be effective just based on the design and constraints of the roadway. The speeds don't drop that much. And then the lane narrowing, surprisingly, we got the opposite result, right? We noticed that it went up just slightly by 1 mile per hour or 2. No speeds went down. Mainly, we thought that people were treating it as a big lane, right? Having those striping on the edge. And I would note that there is no yellow striping in the middle. So that could be also a reason why speeds went up, right? Vehicles were treating it as like they have just a big open lane. Is it working? So right here, in this graph, we're showing the speed throughout Florida Park Drive. It's a continuation of the study that we mentioned at the beginning, the speed limit study. That actually included a quarter more in-depth analysis of Florida Park Drive, and there was a data collection of speed throughout the corridor. So if you're looking at this graph, moving to the right, you're traveling northbound, In the green line shows the speed limit without the cushions, so it kind of fluctuated from 30 and above, in some cases, on average, close to 35. And then we do the same analysis related to that data with the speed cushions, and then we can see that there are four, you can say, inverted peaks, right, that represents the speed cushions. So they are effective, but when we see the speed limit throughout the corridor, it's I would say beneficial seeing it in this context that the speeds do go down as a whole throughout the segment. And the other component of this plan was the public engagement, which it's, again, very important component from any type of planning process. There were surveys for all of the six roadways, and there were over 1,200 responses that we received. Multiple questions were asked. I think there were about 6 or 7 in the survey. In the following, you'll see a couple of examples of the question that we ask. Is there a speeding problem? Are you in support of speed cushions or the treatments? And would you like to see, what would you like to see prioritized? And just looking at the speed cushions on Cimarron and Florida Park Drive, we got over 900 responses. So that was pretty surprising. Every time we do, in my experience, traffic calming plans, there's not a whole lot of residents or a lot of feedback, but it was nice to see a lot of volume of responses.
So, excuse me for interrupting, but
Yes.
was the survey unique? Meaning, if I went on and took it, if I did the survey, was it tied to an email address or some special code that I could only take the survey once? Or was it just open? I could say Mike could go on and do the survey 17 times.
It was open, and the intent was just to get feedback and a representation of the public. We didn't tie it to residents or to a specific unique code. So to answer your question, like it was open, it was not unique.
So it was fallible, right?
Correct.
It could be fallible.
It could be.
Okay,
Could
thank
be.
you.
Good.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
No, thank you for that question, because I had the same question, because I did hear that people took the survey multiple times and put in the same answers. And to piggyback on that too, so you said it was tied to addresses, but do we have a breakdown of what locations are in each of these buckets? In other words, where did the folks live that strongly oppose versus somewhat oppose versus neutral, et cetera?
Yeah, we one of the questions not shown in this presentation, we asked if you lived at this roadway, or did you drive or walk or biked. So we do have that data, and we can break it down as like residents who live in this roadway and see what was their responses.
Okay, but it's not in this presentation?
It's not in this presentation.
Okay, Deputy Clerk, if we could get that sent to us at some point, that would be great. Thank you.
And we're also not treating this survey for this particular road, because we're trying to create, this was a pilot study. So we're using this survey as a whole for the city of Palm Coast, because this option will go on multiple streets.
I see, thank you.
So this is not just for this roadway.
Sure.
Correct. Thanks, Vinish. Yeah, it's
So there was, up here it says 916 respondents, people respond?
for Florida Park Drive and Cimarron Drive. Correct.
Okay, and the total was 1,200 responses, you said?
Yes, there was.
So is
and
that,
some-
what, somebody with the math degree, what percentage of the total population is that it took the survey? I'd like to know that.
Roughly 75%.
Well, no, that took the
Oh,
Took
of
the
the
survey.
population. Oh,
That's-
that's going to be.
less than 1%.
Half a percentage,
Half a
less than
percent, yeah.
1%? Okay, thank you, move on. You can move on.
Okay. Yep, so when asking, is speeding a problem on Cimarron and Florida Park Drive, 41% indicated there's not a problem, and the other percent indicated there was like a problem, either a major or somewhat of a problem. Looking at how many people were in support, about half or more, they were strongly opposed to the speed cushions, and then a few people were strongly supporting. When asking what would you like to see prioritized, about a third, they wanted to keep it the same, which was kind of interesting, seeing that they do recognize there's a problem, but they want to keep it the same. And then the second most response was they want to see slower speeds, And then the other one's just better walking environment or in less cut-through traffic. So that's just some data points for Florida Park Drive and Cimarron Drive. We also asked, there was a question of the effectiveness, what they thought on the effectiveness for each treatments from very ineffective to very effective, and then what was their behavior while encountering the traffic calming treatments. And those responses could be from slowing down and following all the traffic rules, from driving at higher speeds. That was the range. So interestingly, we saw that 193 and 196, the responses thought they were very ineffective and very effective, yet they both, the same number of responses indicated that they slowed down and followed all traffic rules. So that is just some data that we can see based on the responses. For the chicanes, 276 responses, so a little bit less, more or less. There was like 50-50 on if speeding is a problem, right? So there we have a 50-50 split. In support of chicanes, strongly opposed. And when looking at the comments, mainly because people were confused, didn't know how to navigate through them. And that was a little bit to be expected, given that's a new type of traffic calming, which normally once you install these in place permanent, there's a public education component. But because it's a pilot study, these are quick builds and we get data and then are removed afterwards. So again, that was a response that was somewhat expected. And then looking at what they want to see prioritized, similar to the speed cushions, no change, 109 responses to keep it the same. And then the second one, again, from that list, lower vehicles, and the remaining less cut through traffic, better environment. Doing the same analysis as shown previously, you can see that, the majority indicated that we're very ineffective, yet they still slow down and follow all the traffic rules. And you can see that that response was across the board, the one with most responses, that even though they were, thought they were ineffective, they still follow rules and slow down. And lastly, for the lane narrowing, only 98 responses. Definitely a problem, either a major problem or somewhat of a problem. Only 17% indicated that's not a problem. Looking in how many were opposed or in support of the lane narrowing, 40 responses were strongly opposed, and then just slightly low number of people were in support of the lane narrowing. I would want to point out that the less cut-through traffic is related to Woodbury. That was something that we saw in the comments. There was a lot of cut-through traffic. They want to see that reduction. And I think coordinate with staff, there are some modifications on Whiteview Parkway that will address the cut-through traffic on Woodbury. So staff is already looking into that. And the one thing that they want to see prioritized is lower speeds, right? That makes sense. They do indicate that there is a problem, and they do want to see lower speeds. And this slides, these are more of the recurring comments that we saw, just for you to get a quick glance of the actual comments on the notes. Install sidewalks, that was recurring. Enforcement, install traffic cameras, keep them, remove them. So there was a lot of different comments. And all these comments, I think they were important for us so that we can make an informed decision on what to do next, what we want to prioritize, and then how do we go about this traffic calming process. Comments that were somewhat surprising, or it will gauge or it will dictate how we move forward with the technical aspect. We got the speed cushions are not visible at night, so those are good comments that we can implement in our design and either put lighting or do retroflective painting. So it was nice to see those type of comments that we can take this and actually do something. So I want to just, as an engineering and planning, I want to thank the residents for actually taking the time and going through this and giving us good feedback. It's great to see feedback like this. And the last component of the traffic calming plan is the actual process and how is staff going to deal with all the applications or complaints or notes from the police department of there's a speeding in this area. There's a more detailed process that we are developing or about to complete once we finish the plan that will help staff go through the motions of looking at a location, going out and collecting the data, performing a design or recommending a treatment, going to the public, and then so forth. But what you see in your screen, these are the thresholds and the requirements of determining whether a traffic calming is warranted or not at a specific location, right? So it starts from the top. We receive an application or a complaint, and then we look at two, we can call it two beginning screening tools or thresholds, right? So the road type, it will be the residential collector roads. So if it's not a residential collector road, it would not have traffic calming treatments. So your local roads that then have a dead end or a cul-de-sac, they would not qualify for traffic calming. And then the speed limit. So it would only be installed at roads with speed limits of 30 miles per hour. Well, no greater than 30, right? So if there's a road with 35 or 40, that would not qualify. Speeds are too high. Federal Highway does not recommend installing traffic calming at speeds like such, right? So we're looking really at roads that are 30 miles an hour, and they are the residential collector roads. If it meets, then it goes to the other thresholds, which is looking at data, right? The 85th percentile and the daily traffic on that road. And there's an or condition, right? If it doesn't meet the threshold for the 85th and daily traffic, it will be significant speeding. So significant speeding, we define it if there's a 10% of the traffic is traveling at speeds greater than 8 miles per hour, the speed limit, right? So if you have 2,000 vehicles on a road, then 10%, then that's 200. So 200 vehicles are going at 38 miles an hour or above. If we see that on a specific road, then that will kind of trigger, okay, that does qualify to implement traffic calming treatment. Once we go through those processes and we're at this point, then will be public engagement, or really getting buy-off from the public. And that's something unique to this process, that it will not move forward unless you get, in this case, we highlighted it because we want feedback from council and staff. It's 70%. So if we do not get 70% of the residents impacted from the road in favor, they would not move forward, right? So if we get only 65% in favor, then it would not move forward. And that is highlighted again in purpose to make a decision on whether we want to increase it or lower it. I do want to give a little bit more background. The reason why we started with 70, other jurisdictions or agencies have 60 or 65, but what we've seen is that they go out there and they implement the traffic calming treatment or a speed cushion or whatever they decide, and then there's still a good number of residents complaining, so they go back and they take it away, right? So that's the reason why it's 70. We want to make sure that we get the most residents in favor and they're all on board to move forward. And here are the council actions. The first one would be to just approve the traffic calming manual, right, to move forward and wrap up the plan. Adopt the traffic calming process that I presented that was presented in the previous slide, and then select the preferred traffic calming device types. And here's where I want to spend a little bit more time. The preferred doesn't mean that it's going to be the only treatment to be installed throughout the city or at locations that are warranted. It's really to have a treatment that's going to be the first on the list to be implemented and work with residents if they are in favor of, right? So that really is just going to be the first treatment that the city feels that they're going to spend the money on putting on the roads. But there could be other treatments that could be installed based on the road, based on resident feedback, and maybe in other considerations. Anything you want to add there, Vinish, on that one?
The only thing I would add is lane narrowing, because it was an ineffective item. And it cost more to stripe a road than to put a speed cushion or chicanes on it. So that's why we're asking council to, if they have a preference, if not, then we'll build our plan with all three options.
Not a preferred method, got it.
Because it actually increased the speed.
Right, it increases the speed, so we would not recommend it as a treatment on these type of roadways.
But that's probably one of the only side streets in the community that has striping on it, though, because most streets don't have striping, right?
No, they don't.
Yes, sir, continue on.
No, and I guess lastly would be that these are the next steps, but I'll go back and I'll give it to Vinish to wrap it up.
So at this point, we're looking for council approval on these three items. If you have any preferences, first one would be approving the development of traffic calming devices, if you want us to follow that. And then adopting the traffic calming application process, if you go back, if that 70% makes sense, or if council wants to change that number, depending on the recommendation of the consultants.
Well, one question up front I'd like to ask is how much money did we invest in the chicanes and all the other traffic calming? How much have we invested in this plan alone?
So speed cushions, we have them installed on 8 locations, and we bought the entire system for about $20,000, so approximately $2,500 a location. Chicanes were close to $5,000, and they were 4 locations on 2 roadways, so about $1,250 per location. And then the striping depends on the length of the roadway, so we pay it a linear per cost item. So
Did we
for
contract
these
that, did we contract that or we did it in-house?
we had it contracted out. We
Okay.
have a contractor on continuing services, we used them. For those 2 roadways, I believe we paid $16,000 for one road, and then either $12,000 or $13,000 for the other road.
Wow.
I can get you the exact number, those are just the rough numbers that I remember.
What the results would say that was very ineffective use of money. Okay. Anything?
I would say it's good because we know that it's not effective,
Yeah, we
right?
know, yeah. We know not to do that again. Anything else? You got anything? Councilman?
I just had a question, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question in regards to public engagement. What does that look like? How would we gauge public engagement? How will we seek that out?
Right, so there's many different ways it could be done, in all honesty. It could be as simple as, or very limited, we'll send a physical ballot and residents have to vote on it. It could be virtually, where they would vote on that ballot, or it could be a public meeting where people would come in, it'll be an open vote, right? I guess it'll be to council to determine how they want to have that, the public vote on the treatment, yea or nay. But what we've seen, there's many ways. Every city agency, they do it a little bit different based on what works for them. It also depends on the specific location. So if we're talking about 50 residents, then maybe it makes sense to talk to individually to those residents or send emails, or maybe a letter because it's only 50, right? But if it's more like broader, like 100 or 200, then you might want to explore different strategies or a public meeting and do a vote in that public meeting to address all the concerns at once. So it could vary, right? It kind of depends, and it could adapt based on the number of households.
In the past, we have done utility survey through utility bills, but depending on how many roadways and how many people are we sending those requests to, it could be quite expensive.
Would we be able to possibly do it through, we're in the midst of creating an app. So if everybody has their own login and password through the app, that means we can limit it to 1 vote per, right? We can regulate it more. So would it be possible to do the survey that way?
Yeah, I mean, as long as it could be coded in the application, yeah, I think that'll be the preferred way. If there's like a login to a person, resident, vetted through the city, that'll be outstanding, yeah.
We'll have to coordinate with IT to see if they
Correct.
have capabilities to develop an app.
Okay.
Okay, Councilman Sullivan, you had
Yeah,
something?
just, I've always noticed that the electric signs that tell you what your speed is at the time, they can be moved around to different locations, so you don't have to do every street. You do it on you've seen them, what I'm talking about. The speed limit's 30, you're doing 38. With some law enforcement, I think could be just as effective as some of these other, and I have one unique traffic calming thing that maybe some of you have seen in the past. From out west, we had briefed on this a couple of years ago. They put bumps in the road so that as you go across at the right speed, it plays a song. So as you were going down Route 10 and you went by, the Swanee River, they play the Swanee River song. But you only can hear the song if you're going at the right speed. That was the one unique one I saw. And that's been done in places, and it's more for higher speed roads. But did we do any analysis of the speed signs when it says, when you put a speed sign out there and it says?
Well, we actually didn't do one, but Florida Park Drive, for example, before we implemented the speed cushion, had radar feedback signs going northbound and southbound. So in our initial speed speed limit study citywide, we noted that they were ineffective. So people were clocking 38 on Florida Park Drive, even with those radar speed back signs. So
I just think putting together some traffic control in combination with those might be work. And I like the idea because they're movable and you can put them, with just a few signs, you can get them, do a lot of.
During our speed limit study, we did look into the cost for those. The cost for one sign was between $2,500 to $5,000.
I think they can be used for different things, the signs.
Yeah. This company also, were you on the Teams meeting when I had the Teams meeting with these guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They actually sell the signs too. They market all that stuff. Did you have anything, Councilman Gambaro?
No, look forward to hearing from the residents.
I do have a question, if you don't mind, Mayor. So I'm looking at this, the brochure from Traffic Logics, and what's really interesting to me are these rubber Superflex curbs, because I remember, Ms. Puglisi has come up multiple times and mentioned the medians that we did an analysis of a long time ago, at least a few years ago. It was before I was on council. And they paid quite a lot of money, I think, for the analysis. It was like $178,000, I think is what she said, or maybe 278, something like that. And in my recollection from when we asked staff how effective they thought medians would be in Florida Park Drive, the response was that they would be pretty effective at slowing traffic. I see in this brochure, there's these rubber Superflex curbs that seem to me they would be a lot more cost-effective than a traditional median. So I'm curious as to whether or not we've done an analysis as to how much this would cost. And if it would have the same I imagine it would have the same effectiveness as a traditional median. I mean, it looks like it takes up the same amount of space, which is the idea. And you can't drive over it because it's a raised, even though it's surrounded by rubber, and I know the public can't see this like I can, but it's surrounded by rubber, but there's large rocks in it, so it presumably would be more cost-effective. So I'm trying to figure out, here's what I'm struggling a little bit with this, because this traffic calming thing was quite candidly one of my babies, because I'm very concerned. I know, especially when I was campaigning, walking up and down Florida Park Drive and Cimarron, campaigning, knocking on doors, I was mortified. I mean, I would not want to walk my dog. I wouldn't want to walk my child. I wouldn't feel comfortable walking in some of those areas, particularly coming around curbs. And then, we obviously had a Safety on Cimarron group. We've had quite a few people that have come out and advocated for safety on Florida Park Drive, particularly using it as a cut-through road. But when we do these types of studies, we see that, speed cushions are not very popular. Big surprise. That's not surprising to me. But are they effective? And they seem to be effective, but is there something that we can do where, we can minimize the complaints that residents are having because of the speed cushions, but still have the same effectiveness? I will be honest with you, to me, inconveniencing people is worth slowing them down a little bit, if it's working. Chicanes, not working, got it. Lane narrowing, not working, and expensive, got it, that's off the list. But speed cushions work, we see that in the data. They're not the most popular thing in the world, but we also see in the data that people admit speeding is a problem. And if you look at the survey results, people are saying they want a better environment for biking, they want a better environment for walking, they want less cut-through traffic, they want slower vehicles. All of those are achieved by speed cushions because they slow down the traffic. So we have a decision to make. Are we going to keep traffic calming measures like speed cushions because we know they work, even though some people may not like them, or are we going to try to find an alternative that's also cost effective? And so I don't know that I'm ready to make a decision where we say, let's go ahead and move forward with speed cushions even though they work, if we haven't explored things like these other medians. So that's kind of where my head is at. I obviously do want to hear from the public as well, but I also wanted to hear from you all to see if you've done any type of analysis into these items.
Let me go right ahead.
Yeah, just one last thing. In the county, as we know, because we go over there all the time, the city of Flagler Beach has reduced the speed limit to 20 miles per hour on all the roads except 100 and A1A, and that was the way they got around it. I mean, that does work. If you do 20 miles an hour, you'll see it seems incredibly slow, but that was another alternative. You just lower the speed limits.
That whole north end of A1A,
think-
they
Yeah,
reduced the
and-
And just to, Mr. Sullivan, when we did do that analysis and it was presented to city council, the cost wasn't effective. I believe it was in the $2 million realm of putting speed limit signs in every street in Palm Coast, because when you go from one street to the next, you have to repost.
You have to do them all to make that
Right,
work. I
right.
agree.
And we have the capability of making our own speed limit signs now, right? In the special teams or sign department?
We do, but that's including materials.
Limited, it's
And
limited capability.
I think at that time too, isn't it accurate that there was kind of a sign, the materials for signs was like on a back order as well? So I believe we were waiting on, or we were going to have to be waiting on sign material. I can't remember the details, but I recall that being an issue as well. At least that lag time, how long it would take.
And it would only pertain to the local roads, not the residential collector roads. The ones that have the high speeding around Florida Park Drive, we wouldn't be able to lower those speed limits because of this. The current 85th percentile was too high. So it only applied to the roads where people are already going slow on. So I think that's why the decision was don't lower the speed limits. People are already going under the speed limit on those local roads. Now, I can speak to the median project. I was involved back when those bids came in and I brought it to council. There's more, because the road's only a certain width. So to put in the median, you have to widen the road. And then there's, I think, some stormwater work that had to be done. We had, citizen requests for benches along that pathway. And there's only 2 locations because the city only has land at the canal end. So that's where we could actually widen the road for those 2 medians. So I think there's 5 locations now on Florida Park Drive with the speed humps. But there'd only be 2 there'd only be 2 locations with the median. So there's additional costs on top of that. I think we were doing some landscaping. Obviously, that could be cut out. You wouldn't have to do the bench. I think we had to relocate the sidewalk a little bit because it was too close to the road to get the drainage to work and whatnot. So you could potentially save some cost, but I don't know overall how much that would be. We'd have to price those medians out to see if it's cheaper just to pour concrete on site or to buy those and put them in place.
So are you saying that the overall cost, because of the layout of what we'd have to do to the rest of the road and the infrastructure, kind of eclipses what the actual cost of
Right, the median is small
Gotcha.
potatoes compared to the overall cost.
I see, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hey, Chief, could you step up for just 1 minute? I just want to know how you feel about the ones on Florida Park at Cimarron. No trouble with your emergency response vehicles, no slow time, slowing you down?
Well, we have been checking into this, but we don't believe that we have enough data yet, based on this short period, to tell you how much it's impacted response times. So we don't want to give you a number that kind of is a red herring. But we do know that we're working with engineering because the speed humps on Florida Park Drive, the width of the tires on the fire truck are too wide for them to get through because of the dual wheels in the rear and get through in the fronts but not in the backs. And also, Florida Park Drive is such a heavily trafficked road by our residents. City workers are not allowed to be on that road unless we have business on that road, including our fire engines. But that it's rare that we can take that middle area in those kind of situations. So, but we are keeping track and we are able to isolate from a response time standpoint our historical data in the, I'm going to call it the Florida Park Drive corridor. And so an area that's maybe of greater concern for us is Cimarron too. We have access to both sides of Florida Park with stations 22 and stations 24, but Cimarron is a one-way in, one-way out kind of a situation. And so the end of Cimarron, the Cochise Court area, we're trying to keep an eye on that. Again, there's not a high frequency, but if it's your worst day, we want to make sure that we can get there in that
Yes, sir. What about for ambulances? Is their wheelbase narrow enough to go through the center gap on both sides?
That's a great question. I'll check with Chief Tucker. He'll probably get back to me during this meeting, and I'll get it to the city
Okay,
manager.
no worries.
during
That's
the
one I wanted to know about. Was
Yes, sir.
that's-
The rescue, yeah.
Yes.
meeting.
your
Yeah, I'll
rescue.
check with Chief Tucker and
Okay,
get that answer. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chief, you said you were working with engineering though, so that we could potentially adjust those to fit
To see
properly.
what's available, yes, sir.
Right.
It's something that Carl and I have spoken
Yeah.
about and are kind of seeing what's out there. Part of what we were trying to see is what the direction of the council was going to be because this was a pilot program.
Gotcha. Yeah, I actually saw that on Cimarron. I saw a fire truck go over the cushions and said to myself, I thought these were supposed to go through them. So I'm glad you brought that up.
We did do actual measuring and try to get, that squared away, but it's hard to pin it to, hey, because the wheelbases are different. We have 11 suppression apparatus in the fleet, and the engine that's at Station 22 right now is one that goes out of service frequently. It's our least reliable frontline piece of equipment.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and for the general public, these devices they have out, if I remember correctly, most of them are only held down and they can be adjusted. There's only like 10 bolts that are 7-inch long, right, that hold them in place. So they're easily adjusted to fit our needs. So, okay, thank you, Chief.
yes, sir.
Sorry, just one more question.
One more, don't run off, Chief.
No, it's all right.
Well, we got you. Might as well just take a seat over there. No, the only other question I had was, there's other options for speed cushions that don't have that gap in the middle, based on varying wheelbases. I mean, would it just be better from a rescue standpoint or a public safety standpoint to just have one speed hump without that gap in the middle?
Well, I think that the mayor's question is really pertinent. If these are working for folks in rescues that are already in a painful situation on their way to the hospital, there's a chance that, that is successful. And then to figure out, our next step, it seems that we've seen that the speed cushions are working from a study as to whether they're controlling speed. We can do a little more work to see if what you're suggesting is the better option, to just say, okay, let's not set up a situation where some folks can race down the middle because it's not working for the engines. But I also think, in addition to the time, there's a comfort factor associated with that from our rescue standpoint when we're dealing with our residents that are in significant pain.
Sure.
I'm going to check with Chief Tucker on that. I do know for the record that Chief Tucker expressed concern with the same, just to say that anything that calms traffic calms emergency response.
Yes.
And the nature of how our whole city is laid out was not from a public safety perspective. It's designed for the comfort of our residents in a very logical way, but public safety would do a grid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Gary, I think Gary would agree with you as far as the comfort level with that new hip. These are a few things that I'd like to point out. For one, when we're talking about safety on our streets, and especially for the kids, I'd like to see if we could talk to the school. It's a separate taxing district, but talk to them about getting those pickup points off the main thoroughfares, like Laramie, for example. I don't think our kids should be standing out on Cimarron Drive or Florida Park Drive to wait for the bus at all. Personally, I don't. I would want to work with the school board and shift those pickup points off the side roads, like a loop around road or something. But it may slow them down, and they don't have to adjust. The first part of the year in school, it always takes a little bit for them to get their timing down. But get them off of the main thoroughfares to begin with. That's one for me. And also products. Who chose the speed cushions? Who made that decision? I don't want to peg anybody, but why did you choose speed cushions instead of speed tables? Because my envision and what I've seen being very effective was speed tables. So why did we go with the cushions rather than the tables?
Yeah. So we use the speed cushions just considering the emergency vehicles, just to have that gap for that wheelbase. If we wanted the speed table, then we wouldn't allow it for the emergency vehicles. And in discussion with staff, we thought that was the best treatment for this pilot study.
Okay, because I know when they installed these, Councilman Gambaro and Councilman Miller and myself, we were up in Tallahassee, and I saw it posted that they were installed, and I had my wife go over to Cimarron. I said, go down Florida Park, go down Cimarron and see how effective they are. And she went down Cimarron and came back, and she's driving an Expedition, so it's a higher base, a higher big wheel vehicle, and she hit it at 30 miles an hour, and she said it's very rough. And Gary will attest that those speed cushions are very rough. And on Florida Park Drive, I've seen truck with a trailer go around the speed cushion, almost on the sidewalk, to not hit it, because you can't high center it. It doesn't matter what type of vehicle you have. You cannot high center those speed cushions. But I would like to see more use of the speed table, or at least try them out, not by large quantity, but implement them and see if they work better than the speed cushions.
I would like to add, when we met with the manufacturer, they recommended cushions instead of tables because speed table changes the drainage of the roadway.
Yeah.
So it may cause puddling right next to it, which leads to more accidents.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, just.
Because it's a big table that goes across the roadway.
On the main road in Grand Haven, there's a speed table as you come in the back gate, and it does work.
Yeah.
But that's probably a unique case. But if you needed data, I mean, you could
Examine that and see.
take a look at that and see.
Yeah, even if you just buy like 2 or 3 of them just to test them out, because this is going to be a process, right, over time.
The speed limit on that road is 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So you might be able to get some data there.
But we've already invested $58,000 in just this study alone. The next thing I'd like to talk about is speed limits. When all this was going on, Vice Mayor, back when you guys allocated for the speed study and then a specific amount for Florida Park Drive, in the state statute that I read, it doesn't say a study. It says an investigation. So I'm kind of torn in that as spending those high dollars for a study when we could have the sheriff's department just have someone sit on a point with a radar and clock vehicles and get that data through an investigation instead of investing all that money in a traffic study.
Well, I think, are you conflating an investigation or a study that's required to lower the speed limits? Because that's what the statute references.
Well, when I read through the statute, when they were doing the meeting, I went and read the statute. It said an investigation.
Correct, that's to
didn't
lower the speed limit.
It didn't specify. Yeah, it didn't specify.
Yeah, because my first inclination was to try to lower our neighborhood speed limits from 30 to 25. Because when actually Chief Barry Hill and I did some research, and we're looking at a lot of different studies, and I think what we saw consistently was that lowering the speed limit didn't necessarily prevent accidents, but it prevented the severity when an accident occurred. So when you're talking about injuries, life versus death, making it, getting hit or having an accident at these higher speeds, particularly at between 30 and 35 versus 25. And so you see a lot less damage done at 20, particularly to life and limb, at 25 miles per hour rather than 30. But yes, the statute requires a study to be done in order to do that. And then to city manager's point, when we looked at whether or not that would be cost effective, it was a lot of money to make those signs, and then that lag time would be a lot. So when we looked at the cost benefit of doing this study versus just committing, right, and putting in permanent speed humps or speed tables, whatever you want to call them, it just didn't make sense to spend that money and then, to their point, possibly have the chance of taking them out, which would be a total waste of money. So we looked at cost benefit and said this is the best route to go to see what we can implement in the future when we have these traffic calming, this traffic calming manual as a tool for residents to come forward and say, hey, I want to see traffic calming on my street. This is the survey. Okay, now we know that you guys want something. What does that something look like based on what we know works? And what we know works are the speed humps versus the chicanes or the lane winding cushions. Speed cushions. The euphemism of speed cushions, yes.
And a lot of residents that I've spoken with, especially on Florida Park Drive, Ms. Paulette, I think you made a public social media comment about keeping them. I know Steve is pretty much satisfied with those cushions being on Florida Park Drive, and if it slows down the number of trips on that street, I think it's well worth it. Now on Cimarron, I didn't find the one right there by the stop sign. I didn't know why it was there.
Awful placement.
But if you could try some of the speed tables instead of the speed cushions, but we need to try to come to a consensus on the way forward. I think that's what we need to do, because I think we need to implement as much as we can, especially on major thoroughfares like Laramie. Every day someone hits me up about Laramie because of the speeds on that road, and there's quite a few others. The streets that have the 90-degree bends in them, as far as slowing down the traffic, signs to 25 miles an hour on those 90-degree turns, which I have one right around the corner from my house. Those are things that I think we need to look at, because if you're going around a blind corner at 30 miles an hour, someone could really get hurt. So, but I think we do need to come to a consensus. We can open it up for public comment, and then we can come back and
Mr. Mayor?
try to make some decisions here.
You mind if I just throw something out
Sir, go
before it
ahead.
goes out there so that can also be in people's minds? The threshold, public engagement, what does everybody think about that? I think it's a good thing to kind of ask for a supermajority because of how we have a population that it seems to be very close, 50-50 for and against, but it allows different neighborhoods with different kind of beliefs about these to make a choice for their neighborhood versus it just being citywide. And so I just wanted to, know what everybody else thought about that as well.
Well, I've had people come to me or call me or text me or email me and said, I will pay for the speed calming device on my street.
Yeah, me too.
And so people are they're very concerned with it. So, so going forward, what would be your recommendation? Should we expand what we're doing, or give me what you feel? You're the SME for the city.
So I would recommend continuing the traffic calming manual development and then setting up the application process for sure.
Yeah. So you feel we should go forward with the plan?
Yes.
And implement it as needed within the communities?
Yes.
And Mr. Miller, you're saying that we need to try to get consensus from the neighborhoods before doing it?
Yeah, I feel like, as you pointed out, in some locations like Florida Park, it seems to me that a lot of those residents really like this. And then in talking to people in the C section, it's very much the opposite. And so I don't want to, throw them everywhere based on a singular policy if one section does not believe that they will be helpful and, will be here telling us to tear them out every week. And I don't want us to get into a situation where we're spending money and then pulling stuff out and spending money to pull it out. So to the point, when you get a large majority saying, yes, we want it, then it gives us that, not guarantee, but that feeling that we can go forward with this long-term in that area.
Yeah, you're doing the right thing. And I think the best part of these products is they're recycled rubber, and there's only 10 7-inch bolts, so they can be moved and shifted where need be. Yes, sir.
Just on the, it seems like there are, Florida Park Drive and Cimarron are two clear-cut problems areas. I mean, there are other problem areas too. But could we do a survey of just the residents on the road? And if it's like 75-25 in favor, that would be one thing. But what if it's 75-25 against? No matter how good an idea it is, do we still go forward or not? So I think maybe some more specific questioning of the actual residents on the roads involved, it would be better, it would be part of how we should follow up.
I think that's the suggestion, is that on each individual case, they can, a community and a neighborhood can put in an application for
right.
a specific road. Then there'll be a survey or a vote or however we're choosing to get that engagement. And if it reaches 70%, then we put them in, because that means those people in that area want them. If it doesn't, then we don't, because then it's either 50-50 or less popular than that. And so it kind of gives each neighborhood, each street that would apply for this, the opportunity to do what they think is best for their street, And like I said, in these two case studies, they're both kind of polar opposites, I feel, based on the feedback I've received. And so I suspect that likewise, there'll be some areas that are for it and some areas that are not for it.
Yeah, when they first went in, the majority of the pushback was people that were against it. And I think I put a survey up on my Facebook and people were against it, but it's not a very control group. You don't have that control group in the survey the way you need it. So, okay.
If I may, Mayor, so to that point, I know we've gotten a few surveys and somebody submitted several pages of a survey, but interestingly to me, not a single one of these addresses on this survey is on Cimarron or Florida Park Drive.
Right, that's.
So I understand the pushback and the inconvenience, so to speak, and the discomfort for some as well. I recognize that. But not a single signature in support of taking these out are people that are enduring these speeds. And, you know, one of the other, what I'm really battling too, and I know there's people who have reached out about this, you know, Mr. Al Cryer was really, really involved in the safety on Cimarron, and such a fine gentleman, but he advocated for sidewalks. And I would love to have sidewalks, but just on Cimarron alone, this sidewalk would cost $1.7 million. So, you know, I understand in the scheme of things, we say, well, we've got this, you know, over $400 million budget, what's a $1.5 million sidewalk? But to that point, then, you know, how many $1.5 million sidewalks do we put in? So it's really this battle of what's the best mechanism that we can use to keep people safe, and also to your point, and to your point, Mayor, you know, not disrupt the neighborhood too much, and really see how we're getting citizen involvement and citizen engagement to figure out what they want for their area. So I think this is I think your recommendation is great, getting this manual completed, letting us look it over to see if the percentages are there, the area, you know, what do we consider a neighborhood? Are we going that street and all the finger streets that feed into it? What does that look like? Those are the things we'll have to determine from a policy standpoint.
Yeah, I think that would be a larger conversation to kind of hone that. To your point about the, you know, the signatures, that kind of points out the difference between the C section versus the Florida Park Drive. As Chief mentioned, you know, you can go out a couple ways, and there's several cross connectors over to Old Kings from there as well. Whereas in the C section, there is only one road, so
Right.
Off of Cimarron, the C section off of Cimarron, and so every single person, whether they're on Cimarron or not, is affected by this roadway because they all have to drive it. And so, yeah, I think we do need to have that conversation about how we're defining the engagement population for a specific road. Is it only people on the road? Is it only people on the road or within X amount of feet from a connection or something like that? I don't know what the best way that would look, but we definitely need to kind of decide that, because that, I think it would affect the outcome of the survey. Sure. Because it seems to me that the farther away you live off of the road, the more likely you are to not want this, because you're using it as a through road. Mm-hmm. So you're speeding probably, or trying to get through quickly, let's put it that way. Yeah. And that it slows you down.
Time is money.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to open this up for public comment. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Paulette. For this specific, we're talking about this specific agenda item.
Yes,
Ms.
sir.
Paulette.
I'm Paulette Hatfield. I live in the F section. I've been there since 1992, on and off when my father was living there. The point that I want to make also, to your point, Mr. Miller, is that Cimarron is a one-way dead end to the conservatory, whereas Florida Park Drive is between Palm Coast Parkway and Palm Harbor. And anyone who signed that petition, they were all in the C section against Florida Park Drive because it's a cut-through for them. When last June, when you all were repairing the sewer on Florida Park Drive, and the street to Park Palm Harbor was closed, we didn't have 10,000 cars driving on there. It was less than half. I could walk across it back and forth down the middle of the road if I wanted to, and there was no cars around, except during regular traffic times. So the comparison of Florida Park Drive to Cimarron, to push them together in the survey, is really kind of a little bit lopsided. But I also have some other comments about
Yes, ma'am.
Florida Park Drive. The traffic calming speed humps on Florida Park Drive have brought a welcome change to our neighborhood these past few months. They need to remain in place, in my opinion, because the speed humps have reduced the speeding, and they have reduced the amount of traffic on FPD. They also have reduced the amount of cut-through traffic, too, and they have reduced the traffic noise. Our mailboxes are safer now. Children, seniors, bikers, and walkers feel safer now. We feel safer driving down this residential road. We can breathe fresher air now without pollutants. Trucks are avoiding Florida Park Drive too, for which we residents are grateful. My car is still in fine shape and has suffered no traumatic injury from the speed humps. It's safer for our kids to cross Florida Park to catch their bus or a ride home. Emergency vehicles have no impediment from the speed humps on Florida Park Drive. We residents who live within a block or two of Florida Park Drive can now enter onto Florida Park Drive without fear of being sideswiped by cars exceeding the 30-mile speed limit. It's a win-win for both the residents and the city to have safety above speed. So I wish that you please keep the speed humps on Florida Park.
Thank you, ma'am. Who came up with that new beep, Allison?
So just
Mark
FYI, that's the
Stansel,
new system.
Seminole
They're
Woods.
still working on it.
Okay. Yes, sir.
What is it, Cushions and Canes and Sam I Am. So, you know, I live in the S section, so I'm not familiar with the problems of the Florida Park Drive, but I am, Sea Trail is, I ride my bike on it, I've walked on it. They put those lines on there, and actually people go faster now. And it's like the Daytona Speedway. And that curve, they just fly around that curve. And it's the same on Smith Trail, which is what I live off of, just down the road. And I've stood up here requesting a speed limit drop a couple of times before. If they just change it to like 20 miles an hour, so the people going 37 would end up going 27, so it's a 10-mile-an-hour win for everybody. You know, they're going 37 miles an hour down Sea Trail or Smith Trail, and somebody's walking their little dog, and the dog goes to bite the tire and gets run over. Stuff like that happens. You know, it's not safe. There's kids playing, there's kids going to school, there's no sidewalks, the roads are narrow. You know, it might cost a little bit to do a survey, to officially change the speed limits, but how many lives might we save over the next 20 years? Or accidents. You know, people coming down there, they got to swerve to go around a couple walking down the road. That's dangerous. You know, the number one traffic calming issue is to lower speed limits. It's not to put in cushions. Now, cushions might be good. Now, if we don't want to drop the speed limit, so how many cushions are we going to put in on Sea Trail and Smith Trail to calm the traffic? That's going to cost money too. You know, you got to spend money somewhere. Let's do it smart, but let's do it to where we can have an overall effect without causing public discomfort. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, I think people would be better served if they use their cruise control. I set mine at 30 and I go. Yes, sir, Steve.
Steve Carr, Palm Coast. I ditto what Ms. Paulette said. There's some questions I would have, though, is most people, including myself, when a change happens that I'm used to not having, then I sort of draw back on it, don't want it, you know? And I hear the thing about 60 and 70%. Okay, how much does that percentage change over the length of time they're installed? Do we have any of that data? I mean, when you first put them in, yes, there's resistance and there's going to be a high percentage. So maybe after a couple of years, what is the percentage then? Do we have that? I don't know. Florida Park Drive is being an exchange between two parkways. Palm Coast Parkway, Palm Harbor Parkway. Just a lot of traffic, a lot of speeding. And the sheriff does have a web page where you can go and report traffic incidents like speeding. But me, I can tell you, by the time I get in the house and on the application, I forgot what I saw. Okay, that's just me. Okay, so that really doesn't help much, and so then you got to call. So when I think about traffic calming the way it is, you got traffic lights, you know. What do traffic lights do? Well, it slows people down because they're gonna have to stop. What do stop signs do? You slow down because you're gonna have to stop. So traffic calming's all over the city. You just don't want to recognize it as traffic calming. So speed cushion's just another form of traffic calming, slowing down traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will say down in Pompano, I spent a little bit of time down there, even in Fort Lauderdale. They have a lot of traffic calming devices, and even in Tallahassee, a lot of the residential streets, they have speed humps, and they seem to be very effective in slowing traffic down. Yes, sir.
My name's Dave Mollico. I live on Woodbury. If you don't know Woodbury, this won't make a lot of sense to you, but it's got a hard curve in the middle. It's a third of a mile and a third of a mile. It's listed on the nationals, wherever they list it for computers, it's a through street. Believe me, it is not a through street, not built as one. It measures exactly 20 feet and 10 inches wide between the two white strips you put down. That gives 10 foot and 2 inches for each vehicle. You got a school bus going down, you got a dump truck coming the other way, you've got a lady on a 3-wheel bicycle trying to get down the street. She's got no place to go. There is no place to get off that street. If you say, oh, I can go into the swale, not unless you want to go up to your knees. You can't do that. If you get by a driveway, you're lucky. We went through a huge survey. We surveyed the whole street 3 years ago. Turned it into Mike, I think it was, at the city. He approved it. He was going to do it, even published it. Never happened. I finally called him and said, what happened? He said, they stopped me. They wouldn't let me do it. We need something done there before somebody gets killed. And I'm serious. One's already been killed at the end of the street. Now we're going to get one on the rest of it to get it straightened out. Speed bumps all the way along both sides of that street would stop the problem. Not those sharp things, but the other ones, they would solve it. Or block one spot on there would make the cars go a different way. One street, very short, would be effective. That's the one I live on. But you got to do something. You're going to have a heck of a bill for the person who gets killed on that street. It's going to happen, I can promise you. This morning, just going for a drive, we had to stop and then go around a couple. It was just walking on the street. There's no place else to go. And we have traffic nonstop, night and day. Please put those bumps up or do something to stop it before somebody gets hurt. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, standard lane size should be, if I'm not mistaken, like 12 feet. Standard lane size. So that's 20, your roadway should be like 24 feet wide. That's like standard. That's like standard. Yes, ma'am?
My name is Catherine Tubb, and I live on
Closer to the mic, please, ma'am.
Catherine Tubb, I live on Florida Park Drive.
Yes, ma'am.
Right in front of one of these calming devices. It's noisy, horrific noise 24/7. A truck and a trailer goes over, and it sounds like an accident has happened inside our house. We don't have any peace and quiet anymore. I can't go outside and sit on my deck. The fumes are horrible. The traffic is horrible 24/7. We can't get out of our driveway. I'm disabled for life. I do walk. I walk every day on Florida Park Drive. I walked before the devices. I walk now after them. Today, we noticed a mailbox had been hit in our neighbors. The speeding has not stopped. They slow down after the hump and they speed off. Walking down the road, they're speeding, just like they used to. You may have done a survey, but that was just, I don't know for how long that was, but the speeding continues. Unfortunately, I've been on an ambulance 3 times since these. I'm a hard stick. That means they have a hard time getting the IV in. Going over a hump while they're trying to get an IV in is horrible. The ambulances sometimes have gone around these devices. We've watched them. They go almost onto the sidewalk. There's no children in our neighborhood all the way down to Holland Park. We know our neighbors. and stuff, so there's no little children running out. The school bus does stop, so children do come to the school bus stops, but they do not live on Florida Park Drive. There's never been an issue with anything. My husband crosses the street to go fishing out of the saltwater canal across the street. He can't get through. The traffic's lined up now. It's harder for him to cross the street now than it was before the calming devices were put in. There's no way we could sell our house now with these calming devices there. And it tortures us. The noise is so bad inside our house now, and we're back off the street more than most of the houses. It's absolutely horrible since these have been put in. So you wanted something from somebody that lives there on Florida Park Drive? Here I am. We want them removed, please. Everybody that you've heard from either lives a little ways off, so they're not experiencing all this noise and this terror that we have every day now in our life. I have no peace anymore at all. Please, please remove these things. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Hello, Jim Blecken, C-section. Couple bullet points I want to hit on. Everybody knows this is for safety. That's the goal, is to make it safer. I'd like to know how many lives are saved, and the only way to find that out is how many fatal accidents have been on Florida Parkway or Cimarron. The numbers that they put up on the board don't really match. The one where he said that the approval rating is 70% is the goal, well, let's look at the ones just from Cimarron and Florida Parkway. 550 people said they strongly opposed them, 550. If you could pull that up, I'd like to show everybody again. It was 550. Somewhat opposed them was another 100, but the bottom two that said that they were in favor, I didn't have them, but only 900 responses were there. So we're already 2/3 of people saying, we don't like them. Yes, the surveys could be flawed. People could be adding extras, signing in, saying, 4, 5, 6, 12 times how bored they are. How many times do they do it? Well, the same thing could be said for people that are in favor of it. They could be going on 3, 4 times. The fact of the matter is, on Farnsworth and Forest Grove, 14 approved or somewhat approved. 14 total of the responses. For Sea Trail and Woodburn, it was 16 total. That's it. The community is giving a harsh no to that. Let's go more directly to the cushions. I live down Cimarron. It is one way in, one way out. My wife had to have a red vehicle transport for an emergency. Yes, thank you, EMT. You guys did a great job. I'm so glad that she was not hooked up to an IV or having to be on a heart issue, like the lady behind me, or have a neck injury. It wasn't that severe, but God forbid had it been, because if it had been a neck injury, going over those could cause paralysis. Now we're talking about what did we save with these. But there is something that makes people stop. It's called a stop sign. Put 2 or 3 in. Ms. Pontieri, I know you walk your daughter in the stroller, and you like sidewalks. We don't have sidewalks on Cimarron, and I don't feel safe walking or riding a bike down Cimarron, so I don't ride my bike down Cimarron. I wish I could, but that's going to need a sidewalk. You can slow down traffic no matter what. The road's narrow, car comes by, or a truck with a big side mirror, he's going to plunk you on the head. That's not going to be safe, no matter how slow they're going. So I would strongly urge, think about stop signs, because people will stop, and you can have an LEO guy out there, and we can get revenue from tickets for the people that are violating.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Brian Turbett. I live on Forest Grove Drive. Miss Pontieri may be familiar with my name. I communicate with her every once in a while regarding the problems on Forest Grove Drive. We've got a 1-mile road off of Old Kings Road It's a dead end at the other end at Palm Harbor Parkway, but there is a way to cut through there. We've got one street right at the beginning when you turn off Old Kings Road, and another street all the way at the other end. In between, we have no intersections. We have no reason for anybody to stop at all. I have become familiar with 4 sheriff commanders over the last 3 years. They may have my picture up in the sheriff's office somewhere, because I complained often enough to them, and I got 2 of them to do traffic studies on Forest Grove Drive. They do traffic studies, and they put it in, they have it in sheriff records. You can pull that and look at it yourself. You can also pull the records on how many citations they issue over a certain period of time. For January, February, and March of this year, based on previous 2 studies, one from November of 23 and one from October of 24, which was with Commander Dopp, it showed 800 vehicles a day on Forest Grove Drive, which over 3 months comes out to 72,000 vehicles. Not just cars, dump trucks, delivery trucks, pool cleaning people, you name it. Forest Grove Drive is the road that everybody has to use to get in and out of their neighborhood. I have asked for the sheriffs to come and put people there, and they'll send somebody maybe 1 hour a month, or maybe 1 hour for a month. Over that 3-month period that we had approximately 72,000 vehicles, they issued 8 citations. So if you want to lower speed limits, you can lower them as far as you want. Nobody's going to stop unless a sheriff is sitting right there. As soon as they leave, nobody's going to slow down anymore. I've driven on Florida Park Drive and Cimarron Drive. I think it's fantastic. The entire atmosphere of those 2 roads has changed. I don't see people trying to tailgate anybody or get around anybody. So I think they really work. If anyone wants to get rid of speed humps on their road, I volunteer Forest Grove Drive to take them off their hands, because I think they do a great job, and I hope we can get them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Sandy Sturgeon. I've been here since 1989.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about this subject. First, I'd like to start with saying we have speed humps. We don't have speed cushions. So we don't have the same thing that are here. They're not built the same. So they're rougher, they're higher, they're harder to go over, and they are not emergency response friendly at all. And I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for a very long time. The importance of emergency response times, and I know they're going to get back to you because the fire chief has to be part of this council because that is the law. But anyway, the response time. So an extra minute can cause a house fire to double in size. Okay, so I live in the C-section. I live off of Cimarron. So does my grown son. He lives down the street from me. Anyway, if one of our houses were on fire, they would have to go down Cimarron to get to our house. There's no other way except a helicopter, maybe, if they do that. So anyway, time is very important. Also, the equipment. So the fire trucks going over these humps, the ambulances going over these humps, and I know they're going to get back to you on that, but I know that information offhand. They're heavier, they're built differently. They don't straddle these speed humps that we have on these Florida Park Drive and Cimarron. So going over them does damage the equipment. It's going to increase the cost of maintaining it, and you're going to have very expensive equipment that's in there that is not made to go over these humps. Also, you're putting those personnel, the emergency personnel, at increased risk. Because if a fire is double in size and they're going to a fire, now they need more firemen. The fire's bigger, they're at more risk. Also, they're at more risk at getting hurt going over these speed humps also. So are the patients in the ambulances, by the way. The Institute of Transportation Engineers states that speed humps should not be installed on streets that are defined or used as primary or routine emergency vehicle routes. So to get to somebody off Cimarron, they have to go on Cimarron. So that is a emergency vehicle route. Florida Park, there's other ways. But to get to the people that live on Florida Park, they have to go down Florida Park to get them. So they do have to go on that. So it is not, they are not to be installed on those kind of roads. It's not a matter of inconvenience. Everybody wants to make it seem like, oh, we don't want to slow down. We want to go so fast. I am not a speeder. I don't mind slowing down. I watch for kids coming out on the road. So it is not a matter of that. It is truly a matter of safety for my concern. My concern is emergency response time, whether it's a fire truck, an ambulance, a policeman. What if somebody has a gun to your head? You want to wait an extra minute to give them that opportunity? I don't think so, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
And have a great night.
Yes, sir.
C.D. Rossell, and this is going to be fun, guys. I've been working on this for a couple of weeks, and I spent a bunch of time last night working on it. The speed bumps that are inverted solve a lot of these problems, okay? Noise-wise, almost no noise. The design of the speed bumps for 30 to 40 mile per hour zones, by the way, this is all engineering stuff. At 30 to 40 miles per hour, the device should encourage acceleration to 25 to 30 miles per hour. No abrupt braking. Avoid vehicle discomfort or damage. Minimize noise compared to raised bumps. And it's made with standard road materials. So that's why it's hard to find somebody that's selling inverted speed bumps, because they can sell you a spec sheet and an airspace, and you're not going to buy air, are you? So I've already talked to the chief about it. The thing I looked at is 30 to 40 miles per hour, the permanent, made from road materials type speed bump. I have personal experience with these, by the way. It goes way, way back. I talked to the one councilman about the inverted speed bump that I had to deal with. Anyway, the faster speeds, there's the Swiss system, which is much more expensive, but that meets the specifications and the requirements that if they are going so fast, then you have to make a much wider speed trough. So you look at where do we want to take the speeds from down to, and then you use one of those two systems, which is appropriate. And I didn't get into the costs because that's not my area. But anyway, ChatGPT does not want to talk to me anymore, by the way, because I researched the heck out of this yesterday. Anyway, so, and the other thing is the sound. The lady that was complaining about the sound, there is no sound, because it's basically a trough or like a drainage ditch that you go through sometimes. That's basically what it is, and it's fire truck friendly, because you can, what it does is the people that are speeding feel it, the people that are complying don't. So this, I was going to talk to these guys, but they were busy. But it's something that you should consider over a bump, is an inverted system.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm Josh Fabian, and I live in the F section, so I'm very familiar with the speed bumps. And I'll say, I'm not opposed to the concept of doing something to slow down traffic. That's fine, but I think, like what you mentioned, Mayor, I think they're called speed tables that I've gone over before that are much larger, and you can go over more at speed. Because the graph they showed, and from my own experience, you have to slow down to 5 or 10 miles an hour to go over them, and then you have to speed back up again, which causes the increase of people with louder exhaust flooring it right in front of your house or any of those issues. If we could go over the speed bumps at 20 miles an hour, I think that would make a big difference. I've gone over it in 3 different cars. I've done it in a Ford F-150, and you can hit it at 30, and I didn't want to do that to my truck. And I've done it in my tiny little Miata, and you have to go over at 5 miles an hour. And so then I'm the person in front of her house, flooring it right in front of her house, being super loud because I had slowed down to 5, and now have to get back up to 30. So I think we should look at, see what other options there are, that you can go over them without having to go down to 5 or 10 miles an hour to then continue on. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am?
Hello, hi, I am Sherry Montgomery, and I live on Claremont Court, which is one of the last roads before the sanctuary in the C-section. I would like to just give some personal experiences. Obviously, I cross 4 speed humps multiple times a day, going in and out. And my experiences have been, number one, it's great, it slows you down, but as soon as the person gets over the hump, they speed back up. So someone may be going 6, 7, 8 miles an hour over the hump, but then previously to getting to the next hump, they're probably going closer to 35 or 40. I have never, in the 12 years I've lived in that house, been passed on Cimarron. And since the speed bumps have been installed, I have been passed 5 times, which I think says something, that people are anxious, and we need to look at lowering the speed limits, which I know is a big deal, but also enforcing the speed limit. That is a huge thing. If people are held accountable, hopefully they'll become educated and they'll reduce their fees or their expenses or their speed, sorry. Additionally, I had surgery about a month ago, and I came home from Mayo, had major abdominal surgery. And my husband was like, "Are you going to make it over these bumps?" And I did, but it was extremely painful because of those bumps. And my husband is in law enforcement, was previously law enforcement. He knows how to drive. He drove very slowly. And I think the last thing I want to bring up is, has anybody really looked at the neighbors' yards where those speed bumps are positioned? I know I have, because if you look, cars are avoiding those speed humps. They are actually driving around those humps into people's yards and into the neighborhood. So is that safe? I don't really think so. I think a good example of that is there's a new building, I think it's a commercial property close to Hamlin Park, or not, is it Hamlin? The park on Florida Park. They put a cement block and a piece of canoe rock there so people couldn't do it. So I think that's something to consider too. We don't have curbs, so people are avoiding the situation by going around them into our yards and hurting our neighborhood. So thank you for letting me share some personal experiences.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm last. Thank you. My name is Joanne Alberico, and I've been a Palm Coast resident for the last 6 years, residing on Cleveland Court, which is the last intersection on Cimarron Drive. I drive the whole length of Cimarron Drive several times a day. Prior to moving to Palm Coast, I was a New York State Trooper for 32 years, and I rose to the rank of lieutenant. Part of my service was traffic control, issuing speeding tickets, accident investigations, and then the job evolved to handling major traffic issues, conducting traffic safety studies. My background gives me a unique perspective into the troubles on Cimarron Drive. And most importantly, I stand here not because of my own concerns, but as a representative of a majority of my neighborhood. My neighbors and I obtained over 100 signatures in just a very short time requesting the removal of the speed bumps. I've monitored social media, and most common favorable to the speed bumps cite individual preferences, such as getting out of their driveway easier, riding a bicycle, or walking on the roadway. The major concern for public safety is not addressed. We know the history of Cimarron, which was originated by Al Cryer. It was Al's goal to have Cimarron Drive widened or for sidewalks to be installed to facilitate pedestrian traffic and bicycle safety. Speed was not a concern. The glaring fact is Cimarron is a very narrow street that services 900 homes as its primary access and egress point. It is not conducive to pedestrian and bicycle traffic. No one walking would feel safe if someone drove by them at the posted speed limit of 30 miles per hour. Therefore, they perceive vehicles to be going fast. I'm not so naive to know that they're not speeders on Cimarron, but speeding behavior is best thwarted by enforcement. I do not believe there is proof that there is a prolific speeding problem on Cimarron. The majority of drivers on Cimarron are residents who are respectful of the neighborhood. We slow down to a crawl and move over for pedestrians and bicycles. We act responsibly when delivery or service vehicles are parking in a driving lane and we have to alternate the use of the other lane. Since the speed bumps, my neighbors and I have witnessed an increase of unsafe incidents directly caused by the speed bumps. There is no regulated speed to go over the bumps. Some vehicles navigate them better than others, causing near rear-end collisions or passing on the speed bumps. The speed bumps are also forcing cyclists into the middle of the roadway, which is far more dangerous than driving on the right side of the roadway. Also, drivers are pulling out in front of vehicles on Cimarron, going over the speed bumps and causing unsafe conditions, failing to yield the right-of-way. Additionally, the Federal Highway Commission does not recommend the use of speed bumps on primary or emergency roads such as Cimarron Drive. I submit that the speed bumps on Cimarron do not create a safer environment for drivers or pedestrians, but in fact are creating more hazards, inconvenience, and safety issues. Please remove the speed bumps from Cimarron Drive.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Jim Evans, live at Palm Coast, and one thing that disturbs me is nobody has raised the question of, do we really want to take away the very purpose of a public amenity? I'm going to talk about Florida Park Drive. That is an amenity. Its very purpose is to convey larger amounts of traffic in a smooth, efficient manner, as opposed to a residential street whose mission is otherwise. Nobody seems to be bothered by doing this. And let's be clear, it's not a safety issue on Florida Park Drive. In the last 30 years, there have been 0 fatalities. There have been only 1 pedestrian incident back in 2012, and that guy was an older guy at dusk going under the speed limit. Aside from that, there have been remarkably few speed-related accidents anywhere on Florida Park Drive in 30 years. So all of this talk about imminent deaths is crazy. It doesn't exist. Could it? Certainly, but it could occur anywhere. Thirdly, Florida Park Drive has a sidewalk on most of it. Most of it's got a sidewalk. What's the big deal? Walk on the sidewalk. Don't walk on the other side of the street. It has 16 cross streets that intersect it. Every one of those has a stop sign. Any of those would be great places to walk. You don't need to walk right on the roadway. When the school bus comes, they have flashing lights that stops the traffic in both directions. Again, not a safety issue. The speed bumps are vile. They destroy the car, and they defeat the very purpose of an arterial street. And let's be very, very clear. This was never about safety. This was about reducing the amount of cars on Florida Park Drive in a very selfish maneuver by the people who live there, who think that that street belongs to them instead of everybody. Everybody has a right to use that arterial street to traverse north and south. And I think we should let that stand and get rid of these vile bumps. Thanks.
All right, thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Carol Stoughton, Palm Coast, living off of Parkview Drive North. If anyone has pulled out from Parkview Drive, there is no light there. I don't know if the city or the county or the state can do something about installing a light there or making a right-hand turn lane. Sometimes you have to wait as much as 20 minutes to go to the right or to the left. The city's traffic is unbelievable, and especially in the morning and from 4 to 6 at night. So a lot of people say, I can't turn left. They have to go all the way up to Pine Lakes Light to turn left to then to go south. But Parkview Drive is terrible, and I'd really like you all to look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else for public comment? If not, we'll bring it back to the dais. Any closing comments from any of the council? Yes, Councilman Miller.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to point out to everybody, we're not deciding, speed bumps on this road or speed bumps on this road today. We're kind of deciding what the framework is for you to request them on your road, so to speak. So you would be making that decision along with your neighbors, depending on the road. There was kind of also a question about which roads and things like that. I asked staff to give me a list of the collectors, and there's two different categories of them based on like the width of the roadway. But it looks like we have 70 combined total roads that would qualify as a collector within the city that then could be part of this application process. So not every road would be available to add speed bumps to. And then it would, it's based on that designation as a collector. But again, I just wanted to reiterate that it wouldn't be us saying, let's put some here, or put some here. It would be based on this data. Do we find the speed humps or tables or whatever to be the most effective? And then going forward, a process by which the residents can request those speed bumps, not us just saying they're going here, 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 or here. So that's it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, do you have something?
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to let everybody who spoke know that I appreciate you coming up and speaking, because this is the type of feedback that we need. And obviously, the opinions kind of, they go all over the spectrum. And so we just need to hear from everybody, particularly if you are affected, if you have had experiences that some of us may have not had experiences. So just really, really appreciative of everybody's feedback. I do want to respond to a couple suggestions that people had brought forward, because we had discussed a lot of your suggestions 2 years ago, maybe even longer, when we initially were looking at what to do about the speeding, because there's so many people who recognize that speeding on neighborhood streets is in fact an issue. We looked at four-way stops, and there are very specific requirements, so what they called warrants for stop signs, and a lot of the places that we've looked at just don't, quote, warrant a stop sign, so we did look for that. As far as the sheriff's office enforcing speed, if you talk to the sheriff's office, they have a general policy of wanting to issue warnings rather than actual citations for speeding. And they did add a couple motorcycles last year to their fleet, and I believe a couple sports cars as well.
Let's be clear, we added those.
That's right, yeah. No, council, yes, city council did fund new deputies last year, but to that point, they added motorcycles for traffic enforcement, and I believe they want to do the same this year. But really, we can't control how the sheriff's office regulates speed and how they issue citations versus warnings. So maybe that's something to address directly with the sheriff's office. I do want to further address, maybe we meet with the school board or school board administration with regards to bus stops, because I've had a lot of people email me, and I've reached out to the school board, and we're not really getting very far. It's a little frustrating, actually. So I would like to maybe get something together between them and staff with regards to bus stops. I think I did like the suggestion of exploring the inverted speed humps or speed bumps. I don't know what the technical term for that would be, the inverted speed bumps. I don't know, maybe that's an alternative that we can look at. My goal is I do want us to move forward with setting up a traffic calming manual and getting the application process done. And then, leave it to the residents and the folks that live in that area and that are going to be directly affected as to whether or not they want to put in a traffic calming measure. But I will tell you, council, I'm still in favor of looking at lowering the speed limit. When I look at I think city manager put out a price tag of $2 million. Right. One sidewalk is $1.7 million. If it's warranted to lower the speed limit to 25 on our neighborhood streets, and that cost is around $2 million, do we make that a priority? And do we move forward with that? I still think that is something that we should explore. So in my mind, this analysis is not done yet. Maybe we look at other traffic calming measures. If you all are interested in looking at the inverted speed bumps, if you're interested in speed tables, maybe, yes. Or if we are interested in getting an updated price on the 25, on reducing the speed limit to 25 miles per hour and what that would look like and kind of what timeline we'd be on for that, because replacing, I don't even know how many street signs all over the city is not a small lift. But I think that we need to move forward with the traffic calming manual, but then maybe continue to explore and analyze other options to continue the neighborhood safety analysis.
Thank you, ma'am. Anything else from, yes, Councilman Gambaro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've held my comments because I really appreciate everybody's input this evening. And I will tell you, I think a lot like the Vice Mayor, my first inclination is to lower the speed limit, period. And if we've got to invest in that, then we need to take a hard look at our budget and see if we can figure that out. As an alternative, I think, as Council Member Miller said, you know, I think it's also important to have a framework in place to have a process to formally address these concerns by neighborhood. You know, speeding's awful in the R section where I live, but it's different from where everybody else lives across the city. So I think the application process, I think it's a smart way to get direct input. For example, we had Mr. Stansel come up and speak about, I guess it was a Smith Drive, that area. Why don't we use the Smith Drive example or the Woodbury example, the other gentleman that spoke earlier, as a test case for our application process? I think those are a way for us to see if our application process is going to work based on the framework. I agree with the lady that spoke about the speed bump in front of her house. We need to in place them smartly. I mean, who puts? I mean, we gotta figure out a better way to do that. I mean, right? We had a long conversation about quality of life in our neighborhoods recently with Ralph Carter Park. I mean, this is a quality of life issue, and so we need to try to be fair and consistent across the board. Yeah, I don't think we should go final with any of this. I mean, I think it's important to move to the next process, but Chief, we need your input back there, you know. I think it's important from, you know, the response time, the overall, the unintended consequences of the emplacements of where and when, you know, of the speed bumps. As a former member of the Flagler County School Board, I've made several calls to Derek Bars, which is District 1 for us, on, you know, where those bus stops are at. You know, the kids are sitting in the street. I mean, there's all sorts of issues there, and I think I'm happy to work with Derek and other members of the school board to see where we can get that moving. And inverted speed bumps. I mean, let's look at all the options. I think it's important to move forward on the process, to look at the framework. I still think we also need to consider, as we go through the budget cycle, reducing the speed limits. And if that's an investment that outweighs some of the other quality of life issues that we heard from tonight. And so, so that's where I'm at. I'm okay with moving forward with establishing the framework. I think we've got some great test cases on how we can test the application process, but I think we need to take a hard look at reducing the speed limit overall. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sullivan, you have
No, I think I made my comments on the speed limits, and I would worry a little about inverted bumps because of the drainage problems we have here.
Yes, sir.
It probably could just turn into, you know, water runways, little brooks going across the street.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. So it feels like we have consensus to go forward with developing the manual. Are we in consensus on that?
Yes. Can I just add, just for consideration as well, and I'm sure you guys probably would have considered this as part of the manual in the process, but I would assume it may be appropriate that there's like a cooling down period for a request for a street. So for instance, if someone asks for traffic calming devices on the street, there's the outreach, it comes back at 35%. Next week, you can't put in another application for it, right? There's got to be a cool down period, so to speak, for a change in you know, either population or sentiment or whatever the case may be, so we're not kind of being overburdened by repeated applications.
Okay. So we also have consensus on the application process. Are we in agreement on that? Consensus. I see north and south head waves. I would suggest that we do away with the ones on Cimarron, maybe shift those to another street and try them out. Anyone have any issues with that?
I continue to hear.
But that would be at their discretion of what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I think maybe we look to staff to explore, and the consultant maybe to explore maybe some of the other calming methods. It doesn't seem like a inverted speed bump is a temporary thing, right? I mean, you gotta make a hole. So, yeah, so I don't know how test case that can possibly be. Right, yeah, but, I would say maybe if you are interested in shifting that, I know I continue to hear issues with Forest Park Drive. Even though the chicanes, I think that's where you put the chicanes, right, was Forest Park. People hated them out there. I got a lot of complaints. I don't know if we try speed bumps or the speed cushions out there, or if we move to tables. I'm up in the air. I defer to you all on that.
Yeah, and I think we should try to buy at least a few sets of the speed tables and try those. If we can see about budgeting that, city manager, and go right ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, your point about, do you want the devices to come off of Cimarron? I was unclear on that when you mentioned it, Mayor.
Well, yeah, I think it's from what we're hearing from the community, Cimarron is not the street. Now, I would suggest replace, maybe adjusting but using speed tables instead of the cushions, because speed tables are a little bit less abrasive. So I don't know how you're looking at budgeting for the next year, but maybe we can see about that. But I would, in the interim, say we get rid of the ones on Cimarron. We got consensus on that?
Well, I was going to ask, I don't know what the timeline for the next steps is and where we go from there in terms of if we have a 70% threshold requirement, then as part of that application process, I think that the residents of Florida Park Drive would then have to, vote their support for it for them to remain, or vice versa if there's no threshold. So I don't know if we take them all off.
Yeah,
And then,
thank you for that. That's kind of the direction that we're looking for. Is this was part of the pilot program. Obviously, the lane narrowing, we've already painted the lines. We can't take that off, so it's there. But we did remove the chicanes because they were not effective and the public did not appreciate them. So those have been removed. But do you want to leave the speed cushions on Florida Park and Cimarron and allow the neighborhoods to go through the official process, or do you want to keep them on and they're there? They were installed that they could be permanent at this time.
Well, for me, I would say take the ones off of Cimarron, maybe see about another street. But in the interim, for now, leave the ones on Florida Park and maybe look at switching out with speed tables instead of the cushions. That's just my opinion. If you guys are in consensus on that, I have no problem with that.
I agree with you. I think the ones on Cimarron, we've heard enough from the public. It hurts me because I want to see people be safe, and people say, well, you shouldn't be walking or riding your bike. It's a neighborhood. You should be able to walk or ride your bike. And so it hurts me to my core that we don't have the money to put in the sidewalks, and then we don't live in this utopia where we can make this happen. But the public has been very clear that they don't like the speed humps on Cimarron, and so I think we need to listen to the public. City manager, may I ask, what did we budget for this project? Was it $100,000?
I believe so. That sounds about right. Between the study and the actual devices, that sounds about right.
Do we know what we're at right now for budget?
I don't, but I can look it up on our dashboard.
Okay, yeah, because I would, if we came under and we can get a couple speed tables and try them out, let's try to stay within budget.
Can we just talk about the speed tables one more time? Because I thought they weren't a good application for the conditions that we're having, is what our consultant said. Just wanted to clarify. Should we use them? Should we not use them?
Right, so one thing that Vanish mentioned, like when you put a speed table, it might affect the drainage of the road, right? Because you're covering a complete part, so water falls, it might affect where water's going. So one area might get more water than the other side, right? You might see more runoff on one side of the road. So it kind of depends on how the road is,
And that's a good point, because our roads are used as part of our stormwater system in high rain events. So it could mean that the water is staying on the road longer with that speed control device.
Well, we have to do an analysis of it and see what could happen with it.
It also reduces the fire truck and ambulance time, because you have to come at least to a stopping point to go over the table. Where with cushions, you have a space where you have to slow down a little bit, but you can still go through.
we found that the cushions were not conducive for the double axle rear of the vehicles.
And I did get an answer from Chief Berryhill. He talked to Chief Tucker, and Flagler County Rescues can straddle the gap of the speed cushions. However, the rescue's perception is that it's almost impossible because you're at the same time when other vehicles are on the road as well. So they can do it if necessary, but it's difficult whenever other cars are on the roadway.
And also, city manager, you can reach out to the school admin, and I'll reach out to the school board members that I know personally about as far as moving those bus stops off the main thoroughfares.
Okay, so
in loop roads.
thank you, Mayor. I have that written down too. So just to provide full direction from this dais is, I heard email you all the full survey data, which was, some of it was included in your agenda packet in the traffic calming manual. It's not in your printed binders, but it is in the agenda packet virtually. Work with the school district on bus stops on the main roads, and then there was consensus for development of the traffic calming manual, the application process, and then removal of the speed cushions on Cimarron. And then did you want us to bring back the analysis of the speed limit signs as part of the budget?
Yes,
I would, yeah.
Okay.
I'd agree with that.
I think that's
Okay.
what everybody
Yes.
said.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure we had clarity on our direction.
Okay, so we're good? We're good to go on this one. 2 hours and 6 minutes in, we're good to go for right now. All right, we're going to move on. Any other issues? You got anything, Mr. Duffy, on that?
Thank you both for your work on
Yes,
this.
thank you guys so much.
you. Thank
And, yeah, we'll get there. This is a moving target. All right, if we can keep order, please. We're going to move on to item E, presentation, saltwater canal update. Come on up here, engineers.
Mayor, City Council, this is also a part of your strategic action plan. One of your priorities is to continue the saltwater canal dredging initiative. This has been an ongoing process, predates most of you except for Ms. Pontieri. We are in phase 2 of the initiative, and our consultant, Taylor Engineering, is here to present the findings of phase 2, and then also give you some options for consideration as we move forward with budgeting per your direction today. Go ahead, Carmelo.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Carmelo Morales, Stormwater Engineering. And I'm joined today by Terry Cake, who is representing the consultant Taylor Engineering, who's been assisting us for the past about 2 years in our saltwater canal dredging analysis. Our presentation today is going to provide a recap of what we've done in the past. It's going to provide an update of all the activities that we've performed during this fiscal year, and it's going to point out some future tasks that we're asking for recommendations, some action from you guys on how we proceed. After the initial presentation of what's been going on with the canal analysis, we're going to provide, or I am going to provide, just the results of a survey that was performed recently, just for dialogue and discussion. And with that, Terry, take it up.
All right, thanks, Carmelo.
Welcome, Terry. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and looking forward to giving you an update on what we've been doing. So, all right. Previous tasks, what we've been doing up through phase 1. I see a lot of new faces up there. So if there's any questions what we've done previously, please just let me know, and we'll talk you through it. The very first thing we did was a permit and design review. Basically, we were looking back at what were these canals constructed to originally? What was the original constructed and permitted depth for these canals? And what we found, these canals were constructed back in the 60s and 70s. There was essentially no permitting as we know it today for those. There were some records from the Corps of Engineers. With the help from staff here, we found some design drawings from the original canals showing they were constructed to minus 13 NAVD for the entrance canals and minus 9 for all the other canals within the system. That was a pretty huge find, just because that's what we can go forward with the permitting agencies and say, this is what they were originally constructed to, and we want to get them back to the original depth and not dredge over what they were originally constructed to. We performed a bathymetric survey, and that's just essentially a survey of how deep the water is in the canals, where shoaling is present, where shoaling is not present, identify the areas that need dredging. We performed a seawall structure evaluation. This was simply, we flew drones over the seawall and identified where seawalls were failing, and then looked at the bathymetric data and checked to see if there was any correlation between failing seawalls and shoaling, is in any of the erosion coming from failed seawalls coming into the canals. And for the most part, there was not significant shoaling in the canals as a result of damaged seawalls. We performed a very limited sediment sampling. Essentially just took some samples of what's down there just to get an idea of what we're dealing with. We found high organic silty material, which is not uncommon for dead-end canals such as these. Chemical analysis, fairly clean. There was a little bit of arsenic present, but that's not unusual. Arsenic is a naturally occurring element in Florida, so that's not unusual, and it's essentially not going to be a showstopper for us. We also investigate some potential funding sources, and with those, some of the big ones we looked at was Florida Department of Environmental Protection, water quality improvement programs, Corps of Engineers, infrastructure programming, infrastructure programs for is it economically disadvantaged community, and also some St. John's Water Management District funding for resilience. Is the dredging, would that in any way help with resilience during storm events? Good news, bad news is Palm Coast is not economically depressed enough, is not dirty enough, and is not vulnerable enough to storms to qualify for these. So these are unlikely to be funding sources of funding for the canal. As the project goes through, we will keep an eye on these and see if any other opportunities present themselves. Now, Florida Inland Navigation District, which we commonly refer to as FIND, they have a waterways assistance program, and they do provide funding for public access to waterways. And the key there is public access, since the majority of these canals are only provide access to private residents. The funding is limited there. However, they're willing to provide funding for the entrance canals within the right-of-way for the Intracoastal Waterway. So there is a small drop in the bucket there. It's a 75-25% split. Fine paying for 75%. The sponsor, in this case Palm Coast, paying for the other 25%. All right, during this phase, we held a pre-application meeting with Florida Department of Environmental Protection and Corps of Engineers. That is basically where you get the regulatory agencies involved. You tell them what you want to do, and they start telling you what the permitting requirements are for it. The good news on this one, both of them reviewed the data, the construction data that we had, identifying the constructed elevations of the canals, and agreed that was those are acceptable documentation, and they will accept that -9 and -13 as the constructed depth, and we can consider this a maintenance dredging activity. For FDEP, we would have to submit a verification of exemption for the entire project. That is basically the paperwork showing that this is maintenance of an existing project. And Corps of Engineers submit a pre-construction notice also for the entire project. Again, that's confirming that it is a maintenance activity and not a new construction activity. There's a certain element of property owner's responsibility along each side of the canal. I'll get with that in a future slide. The recommendation from both agencies is that the property owners can form a formal entity and participate in the permitting process. There's a couple of advantages of that. One is as a city, it helps the residents there can take advantage of the permitting efforts that the city's going through. And also for the regulatory agencies, they don't have every individual property owner coming at them asking for a permit at the same time. The methods behind that is that the property owners can coordinate directly with the dredging contractor to establish an agreement to dredge their own personal property at their own risk and their own expense. And the city would have to draft a legal agreement between the property owners for the hold harmless and any other restrictions that the city wants to attach to that. All right, the property owner's responsibility is 20 feet into the canal from the property line. That's established by the city. And that is the example that we've got up here on the screen is a property owner with without a seawall. This is an unimproved lot. So from the property line out 20 feet, which is where most people have their docks and their seawalls, that's the property owner's responsibility to do the dredging there. That protects the city from a city funding dredging project going in there and potentially damaging structures such as those docks and seawalls. All right, the summary of available options. We looked at 4 different options. One option, dredge all the canals down to their original design depth of -9. And another one, dredge all the canals 2 foot shallower down to -7. As you can see from the table, there's a significantly different volume of material to be removed under each scenario. A ballpark estimate on how much it costs to dredge right now is about $50 per cubic yard. I'd like to caveat that by with all the active hurricane season we've had lately, the dredging prices have fluctuated wildly. Everyone that's had a dredge has had more demand than they got for it, and the prices have really fluctuated. So $50 a cubic yard is a number that I'm reasonably comfortable throwing out right now. Is that how much would it cost today? If we continue to get out active hurricane seasons, that may change. But looking at the table, obviously it's a significant difference in volume and price between dredging from -9 to -7. So I looked at some compromise situations, and one of them would be dredging all the canals that are not blocked by a bridge to -9 and dredging all the rest of them to -7. The rationale behind that is because with the height of the bridges here, the vessels that are likely to require the deeper draft would not pass under the bridges, so there's not a real advantage to dredging the canals to the deeper depth when it's going to be blocked by a bridge anyway. Other scenario that was considered is just dredging the main canals, essentially the collector canals, if you treat this as a city street. Dredge the collector canals to -9, and the remaining, the individual, the dead-end canals, dredging them to -7. Probably not a huge advantage to that, other than you could extend the dredging time. The deeper canals would take longer to fill back in and require dredging again in the future. The entrance canals, those are the ones that were originally constructed to -13, and that's the 3 entrances from the intercoastal waterway up to where the canals narrow, usually at the first intersection of the other canals. It just had 2 scenarios for that. One, dredging them down to the original constructed depth of -13, and then another one, dredging them 4 foot deeper. 4 foot shallower to -9 to match the depth that we'd considered with the other canals. And as you can see, about roughly a 4-fold increase in volume and price on those 2 different scenarios. So for what it would all look like, looking at the map of all the canals up there, I mean, obviously the first two scenarios, the -9 and the -13, or the -9 and -7, all the canals will be dredged to the same depth throughout. The image here is the option number 3. The canal that is at the, the bridge that's at the entrance to the southernmost canal has the bridge, official clearance about 16.7 foot on that. Anything inland from that bridge would be dredged to -7, and all the canal systems on the northern two entrances would be dredged down to -9. So that's what that scenario would look like. Scenario number 4, the darker canals are the ones where we be dredged down to -9, and then the smaller canals, the dead-end canals, those are the ones that are in the lighter blue. Those are the ones that would be dredged down to -7. All right, we're throwing these numbers out here in a data, in GVD 88. That doesn't really tell you how much water's under your boat. So to help this make sense to the boat owners, there's a NOAA tide station almost directly across the canal from us over at Bing's Landing that has lots of data on water level and tides for the area. So starting with the shallowest dredge depth, the -7, the mean sea level is exactly what it sounds. At a 50% of the time, the water level will be above it, or at 50% of the time, the water will be below that one. So at that -7 depth, the mean sea level, you'd have 6.8 feet of depth at the center of the canals when they're dredged to -7. For low tide, the mean low water, that is a measurement that is the lowest tide every day average over a 19-year period. So for that one, it's mean low water is 6. You'd have 6 feet of clearance. 6 feet of water depth at the center of canals at that dredging depth. Spring tides, when you have an extra low tide, you would have something less than that. But on the typical low tide, you still have 6 feet of depth in the middle of that canal. Just out of curiosity, I looked up what's the lowest tide ever experienced there, and there was a low tide that would have resulted in about 4.5 feet of water in the middle of that canal. That occurred on tax day in 2004. If anyone was here to tell me what exactly happened to result in tide that low, I would certainly be interested in hearing what happened there.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was any weather events or something that could have possibly caused. This is not during hurricane season, so there wouldn't have been like a draft of water being pulled out. But I was hoping you had the answer to that question.
That was exactly my thought. It wasn't hurricane season. It wasn't the dead of winter when you usually get the lowest tide. It was tax day. Maybe tax season just sucked all the water out of the place. I don't know, but something happened to put that in the record. So anyway, the numbers for obviously going deeper, dredge 2 foot deeper, you get 2 foot deeper depth for the entrance canals, dredging 4 foot deeper, that's 4 foot more depth. For vessel type, I mean, the vessels are so different, it's hard to categorize vessels per draft, but a typical large sailboat with a non-retractable keel, that'll usually draw about 7 feet of water. Medium sailboat, something like a day sailor, that one would draw more like a 5 foot of depth. So at the lowest dredging depth, a large sailboat might be draft restricted at the lower tides at the 7 foot dredging depth. Similarly, large pleasure craft, a very large one might have a 7 foot draft. Again, vessels all constructed differently. A lot of them would have a much shallower draft. And then, of course, the smaller pleasure crafts, the pontoon boats, the 18, the 20 foot fishermen, generally 3 foot of draft is plenty for those. So even at the lowest dredging depth, there'll still be plenty of water depth for that type of vessel. All right, placement options. One big part of the design for when you're doing the dredging is where you're going to put the material. Florida Inland Navigation District maintains, well, they maintain one dredging material management area, a DMMA, that's already been constructed, and that is FL3. It's about 4 miles north of the canals. That one is primarily maintained for beach quality material. Because of the distance from the canals, that would increase the price to transport the material up there, and the material in the canals is not compatible with beach quality material. That one is probably not a valid placement area for this material. Now, just south of the canals is FL8. That's owned by Find, and they do have future plans to construct a DMMA there. Right now, it's at least 3 years out on the horizon. So, depending on how soon Palm Coast dredges and how soon Find actually constructs that one, that may or may not be an advantage to the city. However, Find is absolutely willing to work with Palm Coast in any way they can. If that's a matter of working out agreement to use the land at FL8 and either Find develops their own dredge material management area or works out another detail with Find, that is something that Find has indicated they will absolutely work with us in. We would have to come up with an idea to propose to them to actually get a firm yes, no, and determine any prices and any of the details of that. But their business is keeping waterways open, so that they're definitely on our side for this one. All right, future tasks. This is going through the investigations we've done so far. This is what would be left to do to release the contract to start the construction and the dredging of the canals. One's the preliminary design. We've got the preliminary dredge, preliminary survey data for that. It's been 2 years that we've collected that. We want to review that. We might have to go back and do a little more surveying in some areas if we think the shoaling might have changed significantly since then. Once we get that data, we can start cutting the plans and develop the preliminary dredge prism. The dredge prism is basically the footprint that we would give to the dredger to say, you need to dredge to this depth in this area, and set the limits of where to dredge and where not to dredge. The environmental permitting, the pre-application meetings that we had with the agencies, that essentially gets that ball rolling. Now they know the project. They've got us. We've got a file on it. Now it's the part of filling in the paperwork, getting the approval to do that, and getting the permit. The permits available for that. Normally, the part of that process is that the agency will come back with requests for additional information after they review the permit application. I don't expect that will be a huge endeavor with this one, just since we've had the pre-application meeting. We could reevaluate and reapply for any funding that may be available after the time. Once we get the plans, then we would be able to legitimately apply for any additional funding. And we could also develop a long-term mitigation plan that would be essentially monitoring and developing a plan for any maintenance dredging to hopefully keep these canals open with a minimum of dredging activities in the future. Once we're done with all that, we'll have a set of final plans and specifications that can be released for bid to the dredging contractors. Final tests on those are the bidding and construction, and the construction phase services, essentially monitoring contractor and responding to contractors. All right, we're back. Responding to any contractors' questions, making sure they're doing it right. That is something that we can provide that, or the city can provide that, or we can assist. It's the city's decision on that, how much or how little they would want Taylor Engineer involved with that one. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to Carmelo.
Yep. Yeah, so with that, the request for council action it would be really some directive on how to move forward, right? The staff recommendation is to go with option number 2. So we'll be asking if you, well, first of all, you select the option you guys are good with, but we will need to move forward with, budgeting for, fiscal year 26 for design and permitting of the tasks that Terry just described. And the staff recommendation is option 2 for both. The -9 near the intercoastal channels and -7 elevation on the rest of the canals. We would also, over the summer, if you guys elect to continue moving forward with this, update and negotiate what the design costs are going to be. Just based on the previous submittal of what they provided, it was about $310,000. So we will have to relook at the scope based on what we've observed so far and come up with a new design number and present that back to council, obviously. And just as a side note, there's going to be a future presentation just to provide a better update on council's SAP regarding saltwater canal seawalls. I know that was an item that you guys are interested in discussing. It's just not going to happen today, but I believe it's already on schedule for June.
And that was per your direction during your strategic action plan process. So we are working on that in the background, just didn't have it ready for you today.
Wall portion.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, this is really the first time we've discussed this, right, Vice Mayor, as a council, as a new council?
Well, we talked about it during
this-
SAP,
yeah.
because you were absent during that meeting, but that was a workshop that when we first went over SAP and we talked about it.
So we need to do it because it's part of our stormwater management system, I think. It's just the funding that's going to be the issue. So what's the total cost if we go with that option 2? Did we get that as far as the
I think it
inner
was
canals and the?
three something.
I think it was $13 million, right? Was that it?
No, that was option 3.
For the,
Yeah, it's, one is 3.6 million for option 2 there, and the other one was 1 million and change. Was that what the interest canals? Yeah, so 4 million about.
Yeah, so to me personally, I think we need to move forward with, going through the process. I can tell you, it's probably been 3 years, but I've fished those canals back up on the north end, all the way back in there. And there's no drift in there at all. They're like completely closed off. I'd hate to be someone that lived up on that canal on the north end. The furthest north. I went all the way back up in there trying to catch some reds, so.
Yeah, and just to clarify your comment that the saltwater canals are mostly a destination, not a path for the stormwater, right? Yeah. It's interconnected with the intercoastal, right, hydraulically connected. So from a stormwater perspective, really that's our outfall, right? As long as we keep the pipes feeding into it, or the ditches and canals that feed directly into it clean, that's our destination. And so you wouldn't see a whole lot of improvement from a stormwater perspective, in public safety, for instance, right? You're not going to see higher or lower elevations, whether it gets dredged or not. That water is kind of sitting above.
So the homeowner is responsible for 20 feet out from their property line into the intercoastal?
Yes, sir. We have license agreements with every homeowner that has some sort of seawall or dwelling, boathouse, boat dock, et cetera. They have a license agreement with us.
Okay. Anything, you had something, Councilman Miller?
Yeah, I was just going to add to the point that, so yes, that dredging would not improve the flow out into the intercoastal, but as part of that, we're depositing, material from the city via the stormwater system into the canals, which is part of, I'm not saying it's the main problem, right? There's probably 12 different reasons why there's silt, filling those canals, but it's one of the reasons, right? So, either way, it needs to get fixed. And so just wanted to add to that. In terms of the costs, I mean, the reality is like the mayor said, that money's an issue, and any of those other options are pretty high. I think option 2 is the only one that we can actually afford to do. And it's still gonna hurt and cost money. That money has to be shifted from somewhere else to be able to pay for that. So, in the budgetary process. So, just wanted to throw that in there too.
Yes, this is going to be an ongoing process. Councilman Gambaro?
I'll defer to the council member that lives in the.
Thank you, thank you.
And then I do have
Yeah,
some
this is
comments.
my district, so this one hits pretty close to home, quite literally. And in all disclosure, I do live in sailboat country, but I do not have a sailboat. That would be the way that I die. I cannot sail. So I'm advocating for position for the third option, but that's because that's the one I think makes the most common sense. Because if you're looking at where option 3, yeah. So option 3 is the one where we're saying if we're not restricted by a bridge, we dredge to 9 feet. If we are, we dredge to 7, correct?
Correct.
To me, that's the way you have to do it, because there are people who specifically live in those areas, and not just on the main canal, but obviously anything that feeds out to that canal that's not restricted by the bridge because of it being, quote, sailboat country. But I had a couple of questions leading up to this. So if we were to dredge tomorrow, how long would this last?
How long would the canals last clean, or how long would
So
the
how long
dredging
would it, yeah,
construction?
how long would it take before we have to dredge again?
Well, that's a little bit hard to tell. As the city gets built out, I think the majority of the erosion happens like during new construction, right? That's where you kind of see that stuff happening. The more and more the city gets built out, the less construction occurs. You can perceivably see less erosion going in there, but I've only been here 6 years, and I think the city's only been a city for, 25 years or something like that. I wasn't able to find any documentation of any previous dredging. I've heard just through the grapevine that sometime in the 90s, when this was actually Flagler County still, was the last time it occurred, so we're talking about 30 years ago. And truth be told, the canals are in fairly good shape.
They are. They're in better shape than I think we expected.
It's really
right?
within the first 20 foot that it's mostly sedimented, yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, my thinking on this is to take the equipment in, to haul the material, all those things. I mean, if we're going to do this, I think we do it right. I understand the funding, I get all that. But I just don't want to see us, do a half job on this and then think back in years from now, we should have done it in X, Y, we should have done it the right way. And to me, going with option 2 is just not the right way to do it. I think you have to either go with option 3 or option 4, but even option 4, there's some futility there because you're still not really addressing some of the, what I call fingerling canals that could potentially be blocked if you don't go to 9 feet. So to me, it would be option 3. Obviously, we have to look at funding, but I will tell you, I asked the city for some data. We have currently 2,531 canal homes and 256 vacant canal lots. On average, a canal property owner pays $1,315 in property taxes. A non-canal homeowner pays $785 in taxes. So I think we have to be very mindful of how much more our canal homeowners pay in property taxes as well when we're looking at this amenity, which it is an amenity for the whole city. These are public canals. Anybody can access them. So these are all things that we just need to keep in mind. And they're a very attractive amenity for our city. So that was my first question with regards to how long it would take. And then my other question, can you go to the slide that shows the option 1 versus option 2? I think it was after this one, yes. Can you just explain to me, sorry, again, what we'd be looking at? Is this in addition to the 4 options that we looked at, or is this inclusive?
No, so option 1 is the entirety of them?
No, I'm sorry, the next slide. Yeah. So
those are the portions of our canals as they lead into the intercoastal. They're deeper there at those fingers, right, where they connect.
But that's in addition to this cost, right?
Yes, it's in addition,
okay.
Correct. So it's like the dark blue that you see there on the right-hand side where it says 16.7. That dark blue, that's that portion.
Does it make sense to dredge them? I mean, would it be okay to dredge them just to 9 feet? Or is it necessary to go to 13?
Well, I think option 2 included, there was an option 2 for 9 foot on those.
No, I know. That's my point, though.
Yeah.
I mean, do we need to dredge them to 13, or is 9 sufficient?
Well, in my opinion, I thought 7 was sufficient for all of them and 9 foot at that corner. That's what I was recommending.
What was the original depth of the main canals coming into the city? What was the original?
The depth of the main canals is -9.
-9 on the.
Yeah, and then minus 13 for those, the 3 entrances in the dark blue.
That was the original intent. Yeah.
So option 1 is to restore to original.
Correct. Correct. And I've done some research, and I didn't find it in writing, but thinking like a developer, those depths weren't necessarily built for the conveyance of vessels, but there was a lot of fill extracted from these, right? These were not interconnected to the IEWW, right? A lot of, the deeper you go, the more fill you can get so you can build up homes. So those depths are not necessarily reflective of what they may have been trying to do as far as vessels going. I'm just pointing that out.
So,
My last question, sorry, Mayor, if I may just have one more question. If homeowners are not maintaining what they're responsible for, is dredging the center of the canal a waste? How do we enforce? I don't know, I'm asking the question. If we were to dredge the center of the canals that the city is responsible for, but let's say the homeowners never did anything, would that still be okay? Would it still sustain itself?
Would that also, to add to the question, would that silt in what we just dredged out from the sides?
Depending on how much silt is built up right there at the homeowners section, some of it could silt in and slough off into the main canal. It's hard to predict how much that really would be, but if for the most part, if the homeowner decided not to dredge, the biggest impact would be to that homeowner. I mean, you can zoom in Google Earth, you can see some of the people that have docks, and you can see where the prop wash where they've been going in and out. I mean, it looks like on low tide, their boat might be resting on the bottom.
So we wouldn't be throwing money away if we dredged the center and the homeowners didn't dredge?
Correct.
Okay, understood, thank you.
Councilman Sullivan?
You mentioned, but just briefly, for the main entrances off the intercoastal, you said something about fine might have responsibility for that, so that might be a source of money or not?
Not a responsibility, but they can do some cost sharing. They don't have a responsibility after the intercoastal waterway, but since that is still considered public access until it meets the private canals, that's the part where they would be through that waterways assistance program. They would pay for about 75% of that dredging.
So I would think ideally, if we commit the dredging and getting things the way they should be, to 6 and 9 feet, and also simultaneously trying to stand up our own crew, saltwater crew, to maintain, that, would you think that would be ideal, Terry? To me, that's what I'm thinking.
Yes, and we can propose a dredging program. There was a bathymetric survey that was done in the early 2000s. We've got the raw data from that. We can kind of look and see how fast do these canals silt in. Compare that one to the survey that we did, get some idea of like how many inches per year things are shoaling up, and then recommend a program to go survey every so often, and then perform maintenance dredging every so often. So the cost is not this onerous to the city.
Have you been any contact with the city of Fort Lauderdale and their canals? Do you know anything about their operations and the way they function?
Not firsthand, I don't. I believe we got some other people in the office that have worked with them. I can
What
ping them.
about on the West Coast? There's some cities over there that also have canals like ours, right?
There are. I've worked with the city of Longboat Key before. The last time I worked with them, they are trying to establish basically a taxing district to help pay for the maintenance of the canals. They are not even this far along as far as like doing the survey. They're not this far along in doing their design.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
One more question.
Yes.
The option 3, 13,843,350. Does that include the cost of transporting the dredging material to a spot where it can be put?
It does, and again, I get a caveat with that. That is our best guess, given that we are actually doing the design. We would do the design and find the final placement area for it in the next phase.
So we would have to come up with our own area for that.
Fine has to.
Correct. Fine will provide a temporary placement area, and that would be a place where, when you first dredge the material, there's a lot of water in it. So if you can place it on land and allow it basically to dry out, you save a whole lot of transportation costs after that.
You were saying something about, it's beach quality.
To that point, we do have the, once it's dried out, we do have like the shaker deck and all that stuff that we've used for other fill in the past that we've removed from stormwater. I'm saying we already have that equipment. The city of Palm Coast does, so we could certainly dry it out and make it lighter to reduce those costs if need be.
Okay, so we're in consensus? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead,
So
Councilman.
I've got some questions. Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. Carmelo, I'm surprised that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers doesn't have drawings to be able to kind of map how long the initial dredging, would last, from when it originally occurred to now. Is that something that, do I need to call the 3-star myself and find out, or, is that something that we can attain?
We were a little surprised, but not terribly surprised when they couldn't find anything. I believe they found maybe some microfiche from 80s or 90s of something, but nothing materialized as far as the permitting went. It's just something they had, really old documents. From what I understand, when this was permitted back, I'm doing the air quotes in the permitting, the Florida Board of Trustees is what was a permitting agency. I'm not very familiar with those guys now. I think this predates the FDEP, and it was such a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you need help with the Army Corps, let me know.
Appreciate it.
With regards to find, so we've got a great advocate and Commissioner Randy Stapleford, and what is it out of bounds for us, regardless of whatever option we choose, to ask them for the full amount? Is that something that we could try to do? Go ahead.
I have something on that. I've been in communication with him, and so as of right now, current state does not allow for that, right? They don't handle the interior canals. Working on that to try to get to that place, but none of that's finalized as of now. So there's still some time, basically, that we have to wait to have clarity on whether they could do that or not.
Okay.
I think though the direction was, or the suggestion was that they might be able to help with the entrance canals, right? So
The 75-25 is already, the 75-25 is already something that they will do. Anything interior that they could possibly help with, my understanding based on the conversations that I've had with him is that they're not there yet, and he's working on it and trying to get there, but as per the current rules of how that works, can't do it right now.
And that's due to their grants that they offer. That 75-25 is a grant funding.
Okay, all right. It's worth asking, I think.
I know from being out there that those entrance canals have serious shoaling that I've seen. So we're in consensus to move forward with
Hold
option.
on, I had one more.
I'm sorry.
One more just thought is, if we're going to invest the money to dredge, we need to maintain them. I think long-term, for issues that we just talked about, whether or not the owner, maintains their portion of it or not. I just think I think in the long term, if you look at it from a strategic perspective, it'll help overall costs, as we try to maintain this amenity for our residents. But thank you for the analysis. Appreciate it.
So we're in consensus with moving forward with option 3. Vice Mayor, you were happy because that's your district, right?
well, yes, but I just want to make sure we're giving clear direction. So at this point, once we choose an option, we'd be moving forward with design, right?
Correct. Design and permitting.
Budget like 300,000, plus or minus
Well,
310.
no, I think it's going to be more than that. I mean,
I would guess so as well.
yeah. And I only say that because if we're looking at, complete, I hope it is only 300,000. But if we're looking at going with option 3 and we need to choose between option 1 or 2 on the next slide, I would say option 1, since we think that they were originally at 13 feet. And I think, when did we get that last estimate?
About a year and a half ago was that estimate.
Everything
So
else has gone up,
everything's
so I
gone
would
up.
assume, I would assume that's gone up too. So I just want to make sure we're not spending, money without knowing that final cost. So I would say my advocacy and to staff would be to using option 3 and option 1, have them see exactly what that cost would be, and then come back to us for consensus to in fact move forward with that design.
So I just also as a question or kind of a point of discussion, how are we going to fund this?
Right.
Right? This is a ton of money.
Great question.
I'm not sure what the scope and how long this type of work takes, whether it's something that could be done over several years or what the case is, but I certainly don't think our general fund could take that hit in 1 year. That's a lot of service level that would have to be foregone all throughout the city for other things in order to fund this. So we have to figure that out or know what the options here are, I think, before we're saying, yeah. And I get that we're only doing design, right? So we're not spending the 13 million now. We're just trying to figure out how much it's actually going to cost with that.
No, I'm with you. I think that staff needs to come back with a presentation specifically for funding.
Yes.
And we workshop that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I definitely want to, because that's going to be the biggest obstacle, like we know with everything, is how do we fund it? How do we get the money for it?
So
Can I jump in real quick before we go there? Do you guys have the backup slides where it shows a community survey that was done in support of this?
The survey?
Yes.
It's coming up next. If you guys want, before you make your final decision,
Yeah,
we
I
can
think
go
it's
through the
important
survey.
to review that.
Hey, Carmela, have you ever spoken to James Hill?
Sorry.
Do you know a James Hill? He
doesn't
reached
ring a
out to me about, dredging equipment and stuff like that. He gave me a whole packet. Now, remind me, I'll get that to you, okay?
I've spoken with a couple of people, but I'm not great with names regarding some dredging in backyards, but we'll talk later if you want.
Yeah,
Yep.
he's an interesting fellow. You'll enjoy him.
That mean interesting.
All right, so let me just go through before you guys finalize your decision. So the City of Palm Coast, we saw some input from residents prioritizing the development of a maintenance plan for the city's saltwater canals. The survey took place on November 13th through the 24th, and just last year. It required a login to the POCO platform, which limited the survey to 1 per registered email, basically. 562 responses were obtained. So this question, do you live in the saltwater canal? Yes or no? The majority of these people lived in the saltwater canal. How often do you utilize the city's canal system for recreational activities? The overwhelming majority actually said never or rarely. Occasionally was a medium portion of it, and regularly was 93. How satisfied are you with the current condition of the canals in Palm Coast? The majority in this one was neutral, and the options ranged from very satisfied to very dissatisfied. It's kind of like a bell curve in that one, with the neutral being the majority. Have you noticed any issues with the depth or navigability of the canals in Palm Coast? 3 options. Yes, some have noticed, and no, they haven't, kind of almost split, and unsure with the remaining 25%.
Of note there, the yes for the issues almost matches exactly the percent of people that live on the canals. So if I was just guessing about this, I would say that everybody that lives on a canal said yes.
Possibly.
Everybody else gave the other responses.
Yep. Do you believe that dredging the canals in Palm Coast is necessary to maintain their functionality and appeal? A resounding yes on that one. 75% to 24%. How would you prioritize the allocation of city funds between dredging the canals and other infrastructure projects such as road maintenance, park improvement, etc.? So the pretty even split across the board, with the majority saying highest priority to other infrastructure, but not very far behind neutral, and just behind that one was a high priority to dredging the canals. It's kind of difficult to make a correlation with the people that live in the canal or not, right? Should residents living on the canal be subject to a special assessment fee in order to address canal dredging? It's almost 50-50 there. Yes, just a little bit higher response on that one. There was a final question that allows survey takers to provide additional personal thoughts or concerns, and I believe that you guys received those. There was numerous lists, so we didn't put it on the slides. And that was the last one. This is just a bathymetric survey that was performed that we put forward as a depiction.
Okay, thank you, Carmelo. Anything else? So we have consensus about
Should we get public
well,
input?
we're going to do the public comment, but I'm just asking, do we have consensus to move forward?
I'd like to hear from the public before
Okay.
I give consensus.
All right. Yeah, we're going to open it up for public comment for this particular item on the agenda.
Paulette Hatfield, I live in the F section on a canal, and I'm very confused. Are we interested in dredging our canals on the sides, not the main canals, but on the sides, just so a bigger boat can get in my canal? That's my question. The other question is, what were the measurements of the depth of my canal on one of the side canals? Is it 6 feet? Is it 5 feet? Is it 10 feet? Those are the questions I need. I didn't see that there was any place where the main canal had any depth measured now. And I thought they were going to do a survey to determine the depths of existing. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, Ms. Carroll.
Carol Stoughton, Palm Coast. Before you make any decision, I don't feel this is a dire need for our city when we have the need for water treatment plants, for sewage treatment plants. I think 7-foot depth is enough at present. I don't see any calamity. They're not overflowing. People can still do with 7 foot. I don't know how it's an amenity to me who doesn't live on a canal. It's beautiful, they pay more taxes, but this is not a need that the city needs. We need roads, we need pipes, we need repair of so much in our city. So before we even contemplate $1 billion to $4 million or whatever the amounts are, this again is not a dire need. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Miss Jeannie.
Thank you. Jeannie, I live on Cloverdale Court South, and my neighbors, a lot of them can't even get their boats off their docks. Once they lower their equipment down, they can't get out on low tide. Also, too, I think we have a permit that only allows us to go out. We can only go with our docks 14 feet away from our seawall. So having to dredge 20 feet out, being responsible for that is another issue. It's kind of strange. Those panels for the brand new seawalls are not very tall. I think they're 6 to 8 feet tall, and half of them, half of it goes down into the canal. So if you dredge and you pull all that soil away from the wall, what's holding, there's I think they're called deadmen or returns that go into our yards. So if you take away too much soil, what's going to cause that from seeping our properties back into the canals? Plus, when people are building these seawalls, these seawalls are about, what, 45 years old? 45, and they're made of asbestos. So I have holes that are paper thin. My seawalls are paper thin. It's asbestos. Yeah, it needs to be replaced. For us as a homeowner to replace those seawalls, it's $45,000 to $52,000 for an 80-foot span. That's not much, but it's a very, very expensive to us. So for us to be imposed on more fines, fees to dredge or do anything is crazy. Plus, we've been paying taxes, property taxes in excess for years, and we're overdue. Where's the money that we have all been paying for this dredging that's never occurred? We're over 25 years overdue to have had it done, and our seawalls are old. They weren't supposed to last this long. And the people who are building their seawalls, when they break down the seawall between homes, it damages the existing side homes. When they put in the returns, they don't care about what's going on with the other neighbors, and their soil's going into the sea, or into the canal. So it's filling in. I have pictures of both of my neighbors who have done it, and it's literally ruining our canal. But it's costly, and I think there's a way we could do it where the whole canal, like the cul-de-sac can be done all at once instead of piece by piece by piece, house by house by house.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, anyways,
All right, thank
there's a
you.
lot to that issue.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir, Mr. Kunis. SME on canals. Let's go.
Gary Kunis, C-section. First, at a fine meeting, they stated that they would dredge the entrances of the canals at their cost, 50 feet in. Okay? So we're not involved in paying that. They said they would cover it. It's their responsibility, part of the ICW. They would take care of that. There has to be a difference of several feet between the depth of the ICW and the canals themselves, so there is an interference, and I believe that was 4 feet difference between the depths of the canal and the entrances. But Fine said they were responsible for the entrances. We're not to be paying for that. All right? Number two, in Tampa, there was a study done when one of the big hurricanes was coming up the coast, and they were worried about the canals and the flooding. And they did a study, and it stated if the canals were deeper, they'd have less flooding because there'd be more water flow out of the canals into their case, into the oceans. So that part about depth, and if you have a rise in the bottom of the canal and you have a gravity-fed flow of water, when it hits that rise, it stops, and it has to get over the top, and it's not pressurized, so it's not going to flow faster over the top. So it's got to be cleaned out. A lot of the properties had no seawalls for years, and all that erosion went into the canals. The one across from me took 25 truckloads of sand to fill in everything that floated in the canal over the years. Okay? Holland raised the taxes on the swales back when she was mayor. She stated there would be $70 million available for the swales and the dredging of the saltwater canals by the year 2025. But nobody knows where the money is. I sent Teresa copies of that studies and her report on that. Carl says, oh, we use that money to put new pipes in the C-section. That didn't happen. Nowhere were there new pipes put in. I'm the one that brought up Colorado and how badly that was filled in at the last council. And finally, they've gone out there and cleared all that out. But the erosions from the streets have to be stopped because they're filling the canals in. They're not that deep. And dredging the center is not going to affect the sides the sidewalls. Dredging the center is going to clean it out, clean out all the sediments been flowing in there for years. The last time these canals were done was 30-plus years ago. And Alan Lowe has the original paperwork on that and the original paperwork on the original depths. So saying it doesn't exist, it's out there, it's there, all right? So some of this stuff that you're hearing is incorrect information. The dredging has to be done to clean out the canals and to improve the water flow for storms.
Thank you, Mr. Kunis. Yes, sir.
Jim Blecken, C-section. Thank you guys for doing your job. I know it took a long time for you to get here. It started in 2023, but we finally got it here, and I appreciate the work that you guys did.
Thank you.
I think $50 a cubic yard, if we can get that, jump on it now, lock them down, because I have a feeling it's going to go higher. However, Ms. Pontieri, thank you for bringing up how many homes there are. There's 2,531 homes. The difference between what is paid in the C-section on a canal versus the rest of the city is $530 a year. Yearly, that is $1.34 million brought in by extra taxes. So let's put this into perspective. Some of the C-section has the swells in front, some don't. Where I am, there is no swell in the front, meaning my tax dollars that's supposed to go to stormwater drain is only the canal. We don't have it in the front. We've been taxed for 26 years with zero representation of tax dollars going to the stormwater drain system in our neighborhood. If you go back 26 years, or you think 26 years at 1.34 million, that's $34,877,000. There's plenty of money to do option number 3. That's only 13.8 million. And as the last gentleman said, fines taking care of the connector from the ICW into our canals. If we've got $14.6 million to take care of the swells throughout the city every single year, plus $1.5 million for design, which I don't understand where the design every year on your budget came in. It's already designed. It's on a CAD file. $16 million a year for the swells. This is going to take care of it. City of Palm Coast has never done it in 26 years of existence. So it's going to last at least 26 years. I think it's time for the city to find out exactly what properties are paying the most in taxes and not being represented properly, which would be the C-section that are on the canals. Thank you for bringing that to light, Ms. Pontieri. I don't think enough people in the city understand the difference of the taxations. And if those canals where some people are supposed to be able to get their sailboats in, can't get a sailboat in because the depth now is down to 4 feet. I don't have a sailboat, but I had to get rid of my boat. My boat actually settled onto the silt more hours of a day than it was floating, meaning I couldn't use my boat, and I had to sell it. That brings the value of my home down. And if I was a legitimate realtor telling people to buy houses out there, they would be doing the honorable thing and letting people know that what the depth is supposed to be is half of it. Where I'm supposed to have 9 feet, I've got 4. So please think about doing it the right way.
All right, thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Dennis Sokola, I live in the F section. I'm not on the canal, but what I've seen, you should dredge it, but what I've seen through the years of fishing back there, I've watched people cleaning out their boat docks and just shooting the dirt out into the middle of the canal. I've seen the guys that put up the seawalls. They do a big layout of plywood, they pour the concrete, then they lift it up and they go in there with a hose and they blow out all the sand and shoot it down so the seawall goes in. This has to be done proper. If somebody's gonna clean out dredge their boat dock, they can't shoot it in the canal once it's cleaning. It's gotta be monitored. The way they do the seawalls has to be monitored better. I've seen it firsthand fishing back there. I just had to say something about that because if nobody watches these people, they do just what they want. And you all know that.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Webb.
Mark Webb, Palm Coast. I'm not on a canal, but I love hearing the word amenity. What have we been talking about for a month? Amenities. The pool needs work. The golf courses are understaffed and underrun. And now we're looking for what I believe is truly necessary, maintenance of our canals. For 4 years, I was a member of the Flagler Fishing Club. We never fished in the canals. Do you know why? There's no access. There's no access for people to get to it. Now, I think there's 2 little launches for kayaks. You've pointed out there's some property all throughout the canal that's empty. Let's go for the bigger money, buy 5 more lots, put launches in there, increase access to the public for kayaking, for fishing, for using those canals so that the entire city can appreciate the amenity that we have, which is the canal. I remember years ago we had this conversation, and somebody who's been here much longer than I have said that when Palm Coast first started doing these canals, there was a fee on the property annually to prepare for the dredging. We all know we need to dredge those things. All our amenities need maintenance. Well, guess what? It went away. We don't know where the money went. We don't know how much that's going to be done to fix this. I'm a fisherman. I see that as an amenity. I see the property taxes and the values of those properties benefit all of us. We all know 93% of our tax base, which I expect is going to be a little lower this time around, goes to pay for everything this city needs. I'm not standing here telling you not to find a way to get it dredged. What I am pleading with you is to fix the problem. Find a way to generate where the money's going to be. Find a way to make use available for the entire city so we can all enjoy it. Approving the money is easy. Solving this problem for the next generation of people that want to come in here, when it needs to be dredged, when the cost goes up, when the city needs that amenity, fix it. Fix it good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further public comment? Seeing no one come forward, we'll bring it back to the dais. City Manager?
Yes, just so that I have consensus, and I did look up, I had previously in my email, Taylor Engineering's report for their estimated fees for their additional tasks. Now, this was produced by them, and I'm sure costs have gone up, but back in February of '24, the remaining cost for the additional task was $460,000. So just wanted to give you that budgeted estimate. You have consensus, is what I've heard, to move forward with option number 3 and then option number 1, and look at different funding sources to make that happen, because this is not budgeted or programmed anywhere. So where would you like for us to investigate different funding sources from? I just want to be clear, because, you know, administration gets in trouble if we bring up a new revenue source, right? So either we're going to delay current projects, or we need to have an additional funding source. So what is the direction from City Council as what you want us to investigate?
Well, my thinking is that this would be budgeted into fiscal year '26 budget. I don't see how we find $500,000 and cut services somewhere else without this late in the budget cycle. So I'm sorry, in my mind, I think that this has to be in the 2026 budget coming out of the general fund.
Was that the question? That
Yes,
we don't have it budgeted right now, so we can't commence tomorrow?
Correct. So we have this project being budgeted out of the capital projects fund, not general fund. So that's where we're paying Taylor Consulting or Taylor Engineering right now. It's a capital project. So we can put it in the capital projects fund for that next 460,000. But if you're looking long-term to move forward with either option 3 and 1, you're talking serious dollars, and that is not funded anywhere in our budget. So do you want us to look way out into the future, or are you wanting us to just accomplish this $460,000 item as of now?
I think we were just looking at the 460 right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I personally feel like I need to see a lot more from
sure.
that design to even come close to
And
considering.
then consider funding options, the different options for
Right.
staff to bring forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, $13 million is a ton of money.
So we wouldn't begin the next phase until the budget is adopted, which would be in October. And then this would be in your budgeted, in your budget.
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
But we would continue the discussion during the budget cycle and
Yeah,
and go on from
absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
Because, we've got to see where this squares amongst the other priorities, right? But it's a valid requirement. But again, if we're going to do it, let's do it right and let's maintain it. So if we look at budgeting it, let's ensure that we've got a long-term plan to sustain it.
So, yeah, maintain.
Also, City Manager, can we look into making a meeting with Fine specifically on their funding, what can be done at these entrance points, so that we have an official position of Fine as to how they can help us with funding?
Yes, I'll reach out to find Commissioner Stapleford and then Janet, who is the executive director, and we will have those conversations.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we're good to go? All right, thank you, Carmela. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Terry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And we will move on to the next item. Where's my list? We're moving on to item 3, update from Residential Drainage Citizens Advisory Committee. City Manager?
Yes, Mayor, City Council, as our team is switching out here to get the presentation going, the City Council has adopted a Residential Drainage Advisory Committee, Citizen Advisory Committee, to help solve the problems we were facing with infill lot and flooding. And so the City Council appointed several volunteers, if you will. They've spent their own time and energy to help problem solve. And so they're here to provide you with an update as part of their scope, and then give you some next steps.
Okay. Can we get consensus? We're 3 hours in. Can we take like a 10-minute break? Anybody good with that? Really?
I don't have a problem with that.
We got one jumped up. Everybody else? We're gonna recess for 10 minutes. Is that good? All right.
Recess.
Cheerful.